Hello, hello, hello. Hello, all my shop titans in the chat discussing strategy of shop titans. How's everybody doing? Evening Harvest. Harvest, thank you for resubscribing. Welcome back to the fold for your 4-month streak. Hello, I'm glad to see everybody's working so hard on Shop Titans. I need to get back on that, but I've been working a lot and I don't keep Shop Titans open on my computer when I'm trying to do like actual work. Oops. If you can sneak it in. Oh, you didn't want me to see it? I'll pretend I didn't see it. Don't worry about it. I'll pretend that I never saw it. Oh. Hang on, the webcam is getting blurry. As it usually does. Is everybody real hyped for the ending of Jane Eyre? Because I'm pretty hyped for the ending of Jane Eyre. I'm pretty hyped for it. Super hype! Just turn off the notifications in the settings. I don't have any of the notifications on. I just like, for me, for some reason, having a lot of windows open on the taskbar is very distracting to me. Including like just having Discord up or like Spotify up or something. I'm just like particular about tabs. I need my tabs to not be open for some reason. That's fair, Crethian. Crethian, I'm glad that the storm so far has been all right for you. Oh, well, that's sweet. Thank you, Crethian. I hope that the storm passes easily and all is well. There's just so much other stuff there. Yeah, exactly. And I'm working on a script for Did You Know Gaming, and so I'm nearly done with it. I injured this wrist again because, you know, it's just my like, I write, so every now and then it gets exacerbated, but I can't for the life of me find where I put my wrist case holder thing. I had it on like Tuesday or something. I had it on like Tuesday and I can't find it, and my brace, yes. I've been looking all over for it and I'm real mad about it because I would like to like get this thing done, but I keep having to stop when my wrist hurts too much. So I'm like, I could always run out to Walgreens because that's where I got the brace from, and it's a nice brace. It looks like this. It's, you know, this one. This is for the left hand though. It's not for the right hand. I could go out to Walgreens and get one. I need to get more vitamin D pills anyways. Everybody make sure you get enough vitamin D while you're trapped inside. If you're still trapped inside. But yeah, it'll all be fine. I'm just a crabby old woman today, really. I've been meaning to finish this for so many days, but other life things keep getting in the way, and I'm like right on the cusp of finishing it, and it's so frustrating to be like nearly done with a thing and then keep having other stuff interrupt you, and you're like, but I'm at like 98%, if you would just not when you're essential. I'm not essential. No, I'm not considered an essential. You got badly sunburnt. Oh no. Yeah, you're probably good at that point. Wear sunscreen. It's very important for you. Even I wear sunscreen and I'm brown, so. Voice dictate? Voice dictate? Thank you, Harvest. I'm sure I'm essential to Pumpkin. I'm essential to someone. I'm essential to Pumpkin. She'd be so upset if I weren't here anymore. She's such a cutie. Oh, I need to clip her nails. Zach, we need to clip Pumpkin's nails today because she keeps ripping up threads in my sheets. We gotta clip her nails. Anyways. anyways. I hope everybody else has been having a good time aside from shop tightening and storms, and also I think, was it Felly who had like a tree almost fall on their house? I've never seen a tree with whose roots were actually ripped up from the base. That was terrifying. Life would be sadder because there's less happiness. That's fair. I certainly would feel that way about Pumpkin. You have in the Discord, or it just in your own life? We did have a tree fall on our house when I was a kid, when there was that, if anybody remembers the ice storm of like 2011 or something, whatever it was, a tree did fall on my house, and while I was like playing in the room that the tree fell on, thankfully nothing broke. It was not heavy enough to do damage to the house from the angle that it fell. But like, whoa, trees are scary. It's cool but disturbing. Sandy soil makes it more likely. I don't know super what the soil around here is like, except that I looked up on the soil maps to make sure that if there was an earthquake, this place wasn't going to liquefy into the ground. So there's my... I like look up, I'm like digging around on like .gov being like, where are the maps? I know you have to upload them publicly. Tell me. Yeah, that's me. You went to watch Sonic the Hedgehog and saw the tree that fell? Sonic the Hedgehog and falling trees. Sounds like a good birthday. A good bit before your birthday. Yeah, was that movie ever any good? I know a lot of people who went to watch it, and I was just... I mean, even if you tell me it's good, I'm not going to watch it, so I don't know why I'm saying this, but I'm just... Sure was. Well, good to know, just to keep in mind. Better than expected, but that doesn't... Does that mean much? I don't know what you were expecting, but I was expecting literal poop. Jim Carrey did a really good job. That's not surprising. Although something about Jim Carrey's face, it's not his fault, but like, it just makes me dislike him. It's totally not his fault. I think it's because there's this like other, who is it? Matthew McConaughey? For some reason, I watched like one movie with Matthew McConaughey in it, and he was such a jerk in that movie that I can't see Matthew McConaughey in any other movie without just like, my blood boiling and being like, I hate you so much. So like, he did too good of a job in the one movie I saw him in where he was being a jerk. Although it was like a rom-com, so you were supposed to like him in the end, but I did not like him. Hey, Obi-Wan. An essential watch. Expectations were low, admittedly. That's fair. His style is so unique that he doesn't feel like he has range. There's a lot of actors who are like that, who you hire for their like specific thing that they do. Like Helena Bonham Carter, and who's the guy that she, you know, like them. Everything's really messed up and you're supposed to like the sociopaths. Not all rom-coms, just a lot of them. But yeah, it was like, I think it was like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, which I just watched because my parents had the DVD and I was bored one summer. And I like watched it and I was like, this movie sucks so much. I hate that movie. I don't even remember why at this point, but I just like hated Matthew McConaughey's character so much. And dab. Oh, okay. Oh, well that's good, Crethian. I'm glad that you liked it in the end. That's very good. Good in Zombieland? Jim Carrey? Who? Oh, Matthew McConaughey? No. He doesn't play roles, he's just Jim Carrey in a film. Yeah. There's lots of actors who... But, like, that's why you hire them, because you want Jim Carrey in a film in your film. So... I'm sure that, honestly, he did seem like a very good fit for Dr. Eggman. Or, like, that seemed... I was like, yeah, he's crazy enough. You could do that. Liar Liar was really good. Also haven't seen that. I haven't seen most movies, as you guys know by now. As you all know by now. I haven't been doing a good job of staying hydrated, but it's alright because we don't have as much to read today. So, exclamation point PDF if you would like to keep up with what we are reading for Jane Eyre. Cheers, Harvest. Oh god dang. All of you? And Crethian. And Chase. It is my own fault. I know. I need to be better hydrated. Listen, there was a lot going on this weekend, to be fair. There was a lot. I was in like Zoom calls for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours yesterday. Was it 8? It was from like 2 to 11 for 9 hours. I was in Zoom calls for 9 hours yesterday, so listen, I'm tired. Cheers, not Merrick. Because I mentioned it, yeah, that's fair. Pumpkin is enjoying her refreshing drink. I love that. I love that thing so much, Greffian. I love it so much. I'm like sitting here like gesturing like I'm a Barbie doll because I don't want to move my... I'll just go to Walgreens. It's just that wrist braces are like $30. They're so expensive. I know that I have it because I can't have taken it outside anywhere. Where did it... I think a gremlin stole it. Anyways, so where we are now is chapter 35 of Jane Eyre. Exclamation point PDF if you want to follow along, but I will try and summarize what all happened last stream. Work expense. I wonder if I could claim that as a work expense. I wonder if I could. I wouldn't need it. Like, I did injure it working, and it is a work-related injury. I wonder. Anyways. Where was I? All right. Catching up on what we read last stream for Jane Eyre. What did we read last stream for Jane Eyre? Oh yes, Jane came to her lovely schoolroom, her new school, and began teaching the kids and was like, you know, this life, it's kind of fine. It's all right. Yes, I have knee pads also because my joints just fall apart at all times, depending. Very useful. I put it off for a long time, but I'm so glad that I have it, so I'd recommend it. Anyways, Jane got to her new school and was like adjusted okay to her life. She was like, oh, these kids, you know, I could probably teach them. Things would probably go well. Mr. St. John came around to see her and they were just chatting casually when a super hot, bodacious babe shows up. And Jane's like, whoa! And like, St. John's all like, oh god, she's here. And Jane's like, whoa, these two, they're in love. And like, this lady seems really nice. Why won't St. John just get married to her? That seems like he would have a good life. Anyways, flash forward a little bit. Jane has been like spending more time with this lady, and like she knows now at this point that like if she just got married to St. John, like her family wouldn't protest, everybody would be happy. This lady and Mr. St. John seem like a done deal. So Mr. St. John comes over to her house and she's like, well, why? Like, what's the deal with you? And like she uses a painting that she's been painted of this beautiful, beautiful lady to distract him essentially and catch him off guard so she can pry into his heart and ask him deep personal questions. And he basically says, listen, I feel like if I got married to her, I'd be happy for like a year and then I'd hate her for the rest of my life because like that's not good enough for me. She wouldn't want to become a missionary. She's not going to achieve the glory with me. That we did get a lot of detail on that sexy lady. She's not going to achieve the kind of glory that I'm wanting here. And so I don't want to marry her. And then before he leaves, he sees something on a piece of paper and snatches it and like runs away. And Jane's like, well, that was super weird. And then he comes back like a couple days later. It's wintertime. He like plows through a blizzard to come visit Jane in the middle of the night. And she's like, dude, what's up? And he's like, oh, nothing. I just have something to discuss with you. And she's like, cool, dude, discuss it with me. And then he doesn't say anything. And she's like, dude, discuss it with me. And he doesn't say anything. And she's like, dude, what the hell? And then he doesn't say anything for 30 freaking minutes. And then he's like, okay, I think I should explain some things. So there's this woman, you see, and she was the daughter of this man who was related to this other man, and then that man died and both her parents died and she got sent to Gateshead Hall, and then she went off to Lowood Academy just like you, and then she became a governess just like you. And he narrates her whole story to her, and Jane's just like, oh my god, have you heard of Mr. Rochester? Is he okay? Is he like alive? And Mr. St. John's like, dude, you should not be focusing on that right now. I'm trying to tell you a story. And bottom line, by the end of the story, it is revealed that Jane's uncle has died and that she has been left the equivalent of $2.4 million. She has been left the equivalent of $2.4 million. And she's like, say what? And he's like, yep, so bye. And she's like, hang on. Dude, why do you know this? And he's like, oh, you know, I'm a religious guy. And she's like, no, dude, why do you know this though? And he was like, okay, well, maybe a little, I might have like, maybe, you know, the lawyer came to talk to me maybe a little bit because maybe we're kind of maybe related. Bye. And she's like, bitch, you get back here. And And he's like, what? And she's like, you're my family? And he was like, yeah, we're cousins. And she's like, wait, so that means that, like, Diana and Mary are also my cousins? And he's like, yeah, I guess. And she's like, cool, I'll just give you guys a fourth of the money. We can each have a fourth, 5,000 pounds. That's like $600,000. We'll all be good. And he's like, that seems stupid, Jane. Don't do that. And she's like, bitch, I want to do that. And he's like, no, I don't think you do. And she's like, bitch, I'm telling you that I do. And he's like, no, I don't think you do. And that fight lasts for, like, apparently days. But moral of the story, Jane gets what she wants. Everybody gets money. Mary and Diana come back to live in the world, and Jane gets to quit being her school teacher, and she gets to live as a, like, fortuned woman, as an independent woman. She is now, like, legally responsible for herself, and she has the money to protect herself as well. Oh, I'm sorry, Zabasu. So she closes down the school, and, like, she's leaving. She's gonna go back to the old house that everybody loves. She's gonna fix it up so Mary and Diana can come, and, like, everybody's gonna have a good time. And as she's leaving, Mr. St. John is like, why are you so happy? And she's like, cause I finally have a family, and I've wanted that for my whole life because I'm an orphan. And he's like, yeah, but, like, I don't think that's enough for you. And Jane's like, I'm pretty sure it's enough for me. Like, I'm gonna go fix up that house, and then we're all gonna live there together. That sounds pretty good to me. And he's like, yeah, but I don't think that's what you want. And she's like, whatever, dude. And then goes off and sets up the whole house. And, you know, Mary and Diana come back, and St. John comes back to stay there, and everything is kind of happy, except that Mr. St. John is acting really weird for some reason. He, like, doesn't seem to be super warm towards Jane anymore. Like, he was for a little while. He promised he would treat her as a sister and that they would be brother and sister, but all of a sudden he's treating her differently from everybody else. And she's been, he keeps, like, sniping little comments at her that are making her feel self-conscious about, like, how she shouldn't be relaxing and she should be working on something. She should be being productive. She should be doing this and that. And, like, he doesn't do this to his sisters, but he's doing it to Jane. So she feels really weird. And then one day she's studying German, and Mr. St. John's like, hey, come over here. And she's like, what? And he's like, I need somebody to help me learn this Hindi, basically. Hindustani is what they call it. And so I'm going to teach you the basics of Hindustani so that I can learn it. And she's like, okay, I mean, I'm not very interested in that language, but I guess I'll help you. And so she starts taking lessons from him, and the lessons are brutal, and she hates it. And she feels like she can never live up to his expectations, but he's always trying to push her up to them. And it's just, like, a horrible experience for her, but she's, like, hitting the marks that he wants her to hit, and he seems proud of her, so she's like, okay, I guess that's good enough. And over the course of, like, weeks, this keeps happening, and their relationship starts to get worse to the point that Jane feels like she can't be herself in front of him, because if she just expresses certain parts of herself, he gets mad at her, and he doesn't like it when she's, like, overly passionate or overly independent or disobeys him. And so she starts, like, kind of hiding those things. And then one day, St. John's like, hey, Jane, let's go for a walk. And she's like, okay. And so they go for a walk. Mr. St. John is like, you know, Jane, I'm real excited to be a missionary. And she's like, that's really good. Good for you. And he's like, I also can't believe that there are so many other people who don't want to be missionaries. And she was like, well, you know, everybody makes their own decisions. Not everybody's you and has your skills. And she's like, he was like, yeah, but I'm talking about people who do have my skills. Why aren't they being missionaries? And Jane's at this point like, I'm pretty sure that if they did have the skills, they'd probably have chosen that path for themselves. So you should leave them alone. And St. John's like, no, Jane, I'm asking, why are you not gonna be a missionary with me? And Jane's like, oh, hell no, I don't want to do that. I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. And St. John's like, I think you do. I've been watching you since we first met and seeing whether you could be my missionary wife, and I think you can. And Jane's like, oh, no, that doesn't sound fun. That's not like a thing that I want to do. But, you know, it is for God. And what you're saying does kind of make sense. And so she thinks about it for a little while. And she's like, oh, God, you know what? I probably could be a really good missionary. And it is for God. And I don't even know what happened to Mr. Rochester. I don't think he's in England anymore if he's still alive. So I might as well, like, I can't see him ever again. So I might as well just go off and go, like, convert a bunch of people as a missionary. Sure. Except I don't want to get married to this dude. This dude... You know, I just, like, I don't want to be like that. I can go with him as a sister, but, like, for me, love is important in a marriage, and I don't want to just sign away my soul to some dude just because he says I should. So she says, dude, I'll go with you, but I don't want to get married. And he's like, we need to get married. And she's like, I don't want to get married though. And he's like, I will literally not let you go unless you get married to me. And she's like, well, then I won't go because I don't want to get married to you. And he's like, okay, but if you don't go, you're going to go to hell. And she's like, okay, but I just don't want to marry you, dude. We just have differing feelings on this. It's fine. And he's like, I will have full control over you if you are going to be with me on this mission sequence. So you need to sequence. So you need to be my wife, and I need to have control over your body and your whereabouts and your rights. And she was like, listen, dude, I'm not gonna do that. And they have a big fight, and he like leaves. And that night, when like he's saying goodnight to everybody, he like kisses his sisters, and then he just like looks at Jane and walks away, which is really rude. And Jane like runs after him and is like, I'm really sorry about everything. And Mr. St. John is like, you don't need to apologize to me. I'm a good Christian, and I don't hold grudges. And then she holds out her hand, and he, like, grabs it, and then leaves. And she's like, I want to crawl into a hole and die. And he gave her 2 weeks. He's gonna leave for 2 weeks. He gave her 2 weeks to come to her final decision, even though she already said no, but he's giving her 2 weeks to come to her final decision because he doesn't believe that her decision that she currently made was real. It's fine. I love this guy. He's amazing. So that's where we're at in the story. He sounds like a total dick. That's cause I think he is. Cousins doesn't matter. Yeah. The sassy retelling of Jane Eyre. That's just what the like final episode of each book club book is gonna be. Is it's gonna be like 2 hours of me minutely retelling the story in very sassy detail. Yeah, but she was saying she wanted to go with him as his sister, and he was saying it wasn't appropriate and like he couldn't do that because she wasn't his official sister. I think that is very debatable, but all right. My final answer. Hey, Amphigory. Hey, George. But yeah, so that's where we're at. That's finally where we're at, which leads us to the beginning of chapter 35. And that's where we will be starting off with. So again, very debatable. I think whether people would find that moral even in those days was debatable because they are related and they do have a brother-sisterly connection. Definitely some people would have seen it as improper no matter what. But it also, like, does it matter what British people think is proper when you're going to, you know, like, does it matter? Debate? It's all debatable. It's all debatable. Regardless, I get the impression that it was a lot less about propriety because he doesn't make arguments in favor of propriety. He makes arguments in favor of controlling her. So he does make one argument in favor of propriety. He's like, I can't go with you if we're not married. But then he also says a lot of things about needing to have complete control and mastery over her. So it's, yeah. And also wanting her physically. Yeah, River End, right? Yeah. I find this a very interesting book. So we're just about to get to the end again. No spoilers for what comes in the future since we're about to finish the book, but I'm excited. I'm excited to finally finish the book this stream. So with that being said, chapter 35. Good night, Crethian. Thanks for coming. Chapter 35, again, exclamation point PDF if you want to follow along and have it in front of you. Thanks, Crethian. Those were not his words, Harvest, but you could read into his words that is one of the things that he is thinking. You could. It's debate that it's all open to interpretation from like reading between the lines with him and with Jane. That being said, chapter 35. And he, referring to St. John, he did not leave for Cambridge the next day, as he had said he would. He deferred his departure a whole week, and during that time he made me feel what severe punishment a good yet stern, a conscientious yet implacable man can inflict on one who has offended him. Without one overt act of hostility, one upbraiding word, he contrived to impress me momently with the conviction that I was put beyond the pale of his favor. Not that St. John harbored a spirit of unchristian vindictiveness, not that he would have injured a hair of my head if it had been fully in his power to do so. Both by nature and principle he was superior to the mean gratification of vengeance. He had forgiven me for saying I scorned him and his love, but he had not forgotten the words, and as long as he and I lived he would never forget them. I saw by his look, when he turned to me, that they were always written on the air between me and him. Whenever I spoke, they sounded in my voice to his ear, and their echo toned to every answer he gave me. He did not abstain from conversing with me. He even called me as usual each morning to join him at his desk, and I fear the corrupt man within him had a pleasure unimparted to and unshared by the pure Christian in evincing with what skill he could, while acting and speaking apparently as usual, extract from every deed and every phrase the spirit of interest and approval which had formerly communicated a certain austere charm to his language and manner. To me he was in reality become no longer flesh, but marble. His eye was a cold, bright blue gem, his tongue a speaking instrument, nothing more. All this was torture to me, refined, lingering torture. It kept up a slow fire of indignation and a trembling trouble of grief which harassed and crushed me altogether. I felt how, if I were his wife, this good man, pure as the deep sunless source, could soon kill me, without drawing from my veins a single drop of blood, or receiving on his own crystal conscience the faintest stain of crime. Especially I felt this when I made any attempt to propitiate him. No ruth met my ruth. He experienced no suffering from estrangement, no yearning after reconciliation, and though more than once my fast-falling tears blistered the page over which we both bent, they produced no more effect on him than if his heart had really been a matter of stone or metal. To his sisters, meantime, he was somewhat kinder than usual, as if afraid that mere coldness would not sufficiently convince me how completely I was banished and banned. He added the force of contrast, and this I am sure he did not by force, but on principle. The night before he left home, happening to see him walking in the garden about sunset, and remembering, as I looked at him, that this man, alienated as he now was, had once saved my life, and that we were near relations, I was moved to make a last attempt to regain his friendship. I went out and approached him as he stood leaning over the little gate. I spoke to the point at once. "St. John, I am unhappy because you are still angry with me. Let us be friends." "I hope we are friends," was the unmoved reply, while he still watched the rising of the moon, which he had been contemplating as I approached. "No, St. John, we are not friends as we were. You know that." "Are we not?" "That is wrong. For my part, I wish you no ill and all good." "I believe you, St. John, for I am sure you are incapable of wishing anyone ill. But, as I am your kinswoman, I should desire somewhat more of affection than that sort of general philanthropy you extend to mere strangers." "Of course," he said, "your wish is reasonable, and I am far from regarding you as a stranger." This, spoken in a cool, tranquil tone, was mortifying and baffling enough. Had I attended to the suggestions of pride and ire, I should immediately have left him, but something worked within me more strongly than those feelings could. I deeply venerated my cousin's talent and principle. His friendship was of value to me. To lose it tried me severely. I would not so soon relinquish the attempt to reconquer it. "Must we part in this way, St. John? And when you go to India, will you leave me so, without a kinder word than you have yet spoken?" He now turned quite from the moon and faced me. "When I go to India, Jane, will I leave you? What? Do you not go to India? You said I could not unless I married you. And you will not marry me? You adhere to that resolution?" Reader, do you know, as I do, what terror those cold people can put into the ice of their questions? How much of the fall of the avalanche is in their anger, of breaking up of the frozen sea in their displeasure? No, St. John, I will not marry you. I adhere to my resolution. The avalanche had shaken and slid a little forward, but it did not yet crash down. Once more, why this refusal? he asked. Formerly, I answered, because you did not love me. Now, I reply, because you almost hate me. If I were to marry you, you would kill me. You are killing me now. His lips and cheeks turned white, quite white. I should kill you? I am killing you? Your words are such as ought not to be used, violent, unfeminine, and untrue. They betray an unfortunate state of mind. They merit severe reproof. They would seem inexcusable, but that it is the duty of man to forgive his fellow, even until 77 times. I had finished the business now. While earnestly wishing to erase from his mind the trace of my former offense, I had stamped on that tenacious surface another and far deeper impression. I had burnt it in. Now you will indeed hate me, I said. It is useless to attempt to conciliate you. I see I have made an eternal enemy of you. A fresh wrong did these words inflict, the worse because they touched on the truth. That bloodless lip quivered to a temporary spasm. I knew the steely ire I had whetted. I was heart-wrung. You utterly misinterpret my words, I said, at once seizing his hand. I have no intention to grieve or pain you. Indeed, I have not. Most bitterly he smiled. Most decidedly he withdrew his hand from mine. And now you recall your promise, and will not go to India at all, I presume, said he, after a considerable pause. Yes, I will, as your assistant, I answered. A very long silence succeeded. What struggle there was in him between nature and grace in this interval, I cannot tell. Only singular gleams scintillated in his eyes, and strange shadows passed over his face. He spoke at last. I before proved to you the absurdity of a single woman of your age proposing to accompany abroad a single man of mine. I proved it to you in such terms as, I should have thought, would have prevented your ever again alluding to the plan. That you have done so, I regret. For your sake. I interrupted him. Anything like a tangible reproach gave me courage at once. Keep to common sense, St. John. You are verging on nonsense. You pretend to be shocked by what I have said. You're not really shocked. For with your superior mind you cannot be either so dull or so conceited as to misunderstand my meaning. I say again, I will be your curate if you like, but never your wife. Again he turned lividly pale, but as before, controlled his passion perfectly. He answered emphatically but calmly. A female curate who is not my wife would never suit me. With me then, it seems, you cannot go. But if you are sincere in your offer, I will, while in town, speak to a married missionary whose wife needs a coadjutor. Your own fortune will make you independent of the Society's aid, and thus you may still be spared the dishonor of breaking your promise and deserting the band you engaged to join. Now, I never had, as the reader knows, either given any formal promise or entered into any engagement, and this language was all much too hard and much too despotic for the occasion. I replied, There is no dishonor, no breach of promise, no desertion in the case. I am not under the slightest obligation to go to India, especially with strangers. With you I would have ventured much, because I admire, confide in, and, as a sister, I love you. But I am convinced that, go when and with whom I would, I should not live long in that climate. You are afraid of yourself, he said, curling his lip. I am. God did not give me my life to throw away, and to do as you wish me would, I begin to think, be almost equivalent to committing suicide. Moreover, before I definitively resolve on quitting England, I will know for certain whether I cannot be of greater use by remaining in it than by leaving it. What do you mean? It would be fruitless to attempt to explain, but there is a point on which I have long endured painful doubt, and I can go nowhere till by some means that doubt is removed. I know where your heart turns, and to what it clings. The interest you cherish is lawless and unconsecrated. Long since you ought to have crushed it. Now you should blush to allude to it. You think of Mr. Rochester. It was true. I confessed it by silence. Are you going to seek Mr. Rochester? I must find out what has become of him. It remains for me, then, he said, to remember you in my prayers, and to entreat God for you in all earnestness, that you may not indeed become a castaway. I had thought I recognized in you one of the chosen, but God sees not as man sees. His will be done. He opened the gate, passed through it, and strayed away down the glen. He was soon out of sight. On re-entering the parlor, I found Diana standing at the window, looking very thoughtful. Diana was a great deal taller than I, She put her hand on my shoulder and, stooping, examined my face. "Jane," she said, "you are always agitated and pale now. I am sure there is something the matter. Tell me what business St. John and you have on hands. I have watched you this half-hour from the window. You must forgive my being such a spy, but for a long time I have fancied I hardly know what St. John is. A strange being." She paused. I did not speak. Soon she resumed. "That brother of mine cherishes peculiar views of some sort respecting you, I am sure. He has long distinguished you by a notice and interest he never showed to anyone else. To what end? I wish he loved you. Does he, Jane?" I put her cool hand to my hot forehead. "No, Di, not one whit." "Then why does he follow you so with his eyes, and get you so frequently alone with him, and keep you so continually at his side? Mary and I had both concluded he wished you to marry him." "He does. He's asked me to be his wife." Diana clapped her hands. "That is just what we hoped and thought. And you will marry him, Jane, won't you? And then he will stay in England." "Far from that, Diana. His sole idea in proposing to me is to procure a fitting fellow-laborer in his Indian toils." "What? He wishes you to go to India?" "Yes." "Madness!" she exclaimed. "You would not live 3 months there, I'm certain. You never shall go. You have not consented, have you, Jane?" "I have refused to marry him, and have consequently displeased him," she suggested. "Deeply. He will never forgive me, I fear. Yet I offered to accompany him as his sister." "It was frantic folly to do so, Jane. Think of the task you undertook, one of incessant fatigue, where fatigue kills even the strong, and you are weak. St. John, you know him, would urge you to impossibilities. With him there would be no permission to rest during the hot hours, and, unfortunately, I have noticed, whatever he exacts you force yourself to perform. I am astonished you found courage to refuse his hand." "You do not love him, then, Jane?" "Not as a husband. Yet he is a handsome fellow. And I am so plain, you see, Di. We should never suit." "Plain? You? Not at all. You are much too pretty as well as too good to be grilled alive in Calcutta." And again she earnestly conjured me to give up all thoughts of going out with her brother. "I must indeed," I said, "for when I just now repeated the offer of serving him for a deacon, he expressed himself shocked at my want of decency. He seemed to think I had committed an impropriety in proposing to accompany him unmarried, as if I had not from the first hoped to find in him a brother and habitually regarded him as such." "What makes you say he does not love you, Jane?" "You should hear himself on the subject. He has again and again explained that it is not himself, but his office he wishes to mate. He has told me I am formed for labor, not for love, which is true, no doubt. But in my opinion, if I am not formed for love, it follows that I am not formed for marriage. Would it not be strange, Di, to be chained for life to a man who regarded one but as a useful tool? Insupportable! Unnatural! Out of the question! And then," I continued, "though I have only sisterly affection for him now, yet if forced to be his wife, I can imagine the possibility of conceiving an inevitable, strange, torturing kind of love for him, because he is so talented. There's often a certain heroic grandeur in his look, manner, and conversation. In that case my lot would become unspeakably wretched. He would not want me to love him, and if I showed the feeling he would make me sensible that it was a superfluity, unrequired by him, unbecoming in me. I know he would." "And yet St. John is a good man," said Diana. "He is a good and a great man, but he forgets pitilessly the feelings and claims of little people in pursuing his own large views. It is better, therefore, for the insignificant to keep out of his way, lest, in his progress, he should trample them down. Here he comes! I will leave you, Diana." And I hastened upstairs as I saw him entering the garden. But I was forced to meet him again at supper. During that meal he appeared just as composed as usual. I had thought he would hardly speak to me, and I was certain he had given up the pursuit of his matrimonial scheme. The sequel showed I was mistaken on both points. He addressed me precisely in his ordinary manner, or what had of late been his ordinary manner, one scrupulously polite. No doubt he had invoked the help of the Holy Spirit to subdue the anger I had roused in him, and now believed he had forgiven me once more. For the evening reading before prayers he selected the 21st chapter of Revelation. It was at all times pleasant to listen while from his lips fell the word of the Bible. Never did his fine voice sound at once so sweet and full, never did his manner become so impressive in its noble simplicity. as when he delivered the oracles of God, and tonight that voice took a more solemn tone, that manner a more thrilling meaning, as he sat in the midst of his household circle, the May moon shining in through the uncurtained window and rendering almost unnecessary the light of the candle on the table. As he sat there, bending over the great old Bible, and described from its page the vision of the new heaven and the new earth, told how God would come to dwell with men, how he would wipe away all tears from their eyes, and promised that there should be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, nor any more pain, because the former things were passed away. The succeeding words thrilled me strangely as he spoke them, especially as I felt by the slight, indescribable alteration in sound that in uttering them his eye had turned on me. He that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. But, was slowly, distinctly read, the fearful, the unbelieving, and etc., shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Henceforward I knew what fate St. John feared for me. A calm, subdued triumph, blent with a longing earnestness, marked his enunciation of the last glorious verses of that chapter. The reader believed his name was already written in the Lamb's book of life, and he yearned after the hour which should admit him to the city to which the kings of the earth bring their glory and honor, which has no need of sun or moon to shine in it, because the glory of God lightens it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. In the prayer following the chapter, all his energy gathered, all his stern zeal woke. He was in deep earnest, wrestling with God, and resolved on a conquest. He supplicated strength for the weak-hearted, guidance for wanderers from the fold, a return even at the 11th hour for those whom the temptations of the world and the flesh were luring from the narrow path. He asked as he urged, he claimed the boon of a brand snatched from the burning. Earnestness is ever deeply solemn. First, as I listened to that prayer, I wondered at his. Then, when it continued and rose, I was touched by it, and at last awed. He felt the greatness and goodness of his purpose so sincerely. Others who heard him plead for it could not but feel it too. The prayer over, we took leave of him. He was to go at a very early hour in the morning. Diana and Mary, having kissed him, left the room, in compliance, I think, with a whispered hint from him. I tendered my hand, and wished him a pleasant journey. Thank you, Jane. As I said, I shall return from Cambridge in a fortnight. That space, then, is yet left you for reflection. If I listened to human pride, I should say no more to you of marriage with me, but I listen to my duty, and keep steadily in view my first aim, to do all things to the glory of God. My master was long-suffering, so will I be. I cannot give you up to perdition as a vessel of wrath. Repent, resolve, while there is yet time. Remember, we are bid to work while it is day, warned that the night cometh when no man shall work. Remember the fate of Dives, who had his good things in his life. God gave you strength to choose that better part which shall not be taken from you. He laid his hand on my head as he uttered the last words. He had spoken earnestly, mildly. His look was not, indeed, that of a lover beholding his mistress, but it was that of a pastor recalling his wandering sheep, or better, of a guardian angel watching the soul for which he is responsible. All men of talent, whether they be men of feeling or not, whether they be zealots or aspirants or despots, provided only they be sincere, have their sublime moments, when they subdue and rule. I felt veneration for St. John, veneration so strong that its impetus thrust me at once to the point I had so long shunned. I was tempted to cease struggling with him, to rush down the torrent of his will into the gulf of his existence, and there lose my own. I was almost as hard beset by him now as I had been once before, in a different way by another. I was a fool both times. To have yielded then would have been an error of principle. To have yielded now would have been an error of judgment. So I think at this hour, when I look back to the crisis through the quiet medium of time, I was unconscious of folly at the instant. I stood motionless under my Hierophant's touch. My refusals were forgotten, my fears overcome, my wrestlings paralyzed. The impossible, my marriage with St. John, was fast becoming the possible. All was changing utterly with a sudden sweep. Religion called, angels beckoned, God commanded, life rolled together like a scroll, death's gates opening showed eternity beyond. It seemed that for safety and bliss there, all here might be sacrificed in a second. The dim room was full of visions. "Could you decide now?" asked the missionary. The inquiry was put in gentle tones. He drew me to him as gently. Oh, that gentleness! How far more potent is it than force! I could resist St. John's wrath. I grew pliant as a reed under his kindness. Yet I knew all the time if I yielded now I should not the less be made to repent some day of my former rebellion. His nature was not changed by 1 hour of solemn prayer. It was only elevated. I could decide if I were but certain, I answered. Were I but convinced that it is God's will I should marry you, I could vow to marry you here and now. Come afterwards what would. My prayers are heard! Ejaculated St. John. He pressed his hand firmer on my head, as if he claimed me. He surrounded me with his arm, almost as if he loved me. I say almost. I knew the difference, for I had felt what it was to be loved. But, like him, I had now put love out of the question, and thought only of duty. I contended with my inward dimness of vision, before which clouds yet rolled. I sincerely, deeply, fervently longed to do what was right, and only that. Show me the path, I entreated of heaven. I was excited more than I had ever been, and whether what followed was the effect of excitement, the reader shall judge. All the house was still, for I believe all except St. John and myself were now retired to rest. The one candle was dying out. The room was full of moonlight. My heart beat fast and thick. I heard its throb. Suddenly it stood still to an inexpressible feeling that thrilled it through, and passed at once to my head and extremities. The feeling was not like an electric shock, but it was quite as sharp, as strange, as startling. It acted on my senses as if their utmost activity hitherto had been but torpor, from which they were now summoned and forced to wake. They rose expectant. Eye and ear waited, while the flesh quivered on my bones. "What have you heard? What do you see?" asked St. John. I saw nothing, but I heard a voice somewhere cry, "Jane! Jane! Jane!" Nothing more. "Oh God, what is it?" I gasped. I might have said, "Where is it?" for it did not seem in the room, nor in the house, nor in the garden. It did not come out of the air, nor from under the earth, nor from overhead. I had heard it, where or whence, forever impossible to know, and it was the voice of a human being, a known, loved, well-remembered voice, that of Edward Fairfax Rochester, and it spoke in pain and woe, wildly, eerily, urgently. "I am coming!" I cried. "Wait for me! Oh, I will come!" I flew to the door and looked into the passage. It was dark. I ran out into the garden. It was void. "Where are you?" I exclaimed. The hills beyond the marsh glen sent the answer faintly back. "Where are you?" I listened. The wind sighed low in the firs. All was moorland, loneliness, and midnight hush. "Down, superstition!" I commented, as that spectre rose up black by the black yew at the gate. "This is not thy deception, nor thy witchcraft. It is the work of nature. She was roused and did no miracle, but her best." I broke from St. John, who had followed, and would have detained me. It was my time to assume ascendancy. My powers were in play and in force. I told him to forbear question or remark. I desired him to leave me. I must and would be alone. He obeyed at once. Where there is energy to command well enough, obedience never fails. I mounted to my chamber, locked myself in, fell on my knees, and prayed in my way. A different way to St. John's, but effective in its own fashion. I seemed to penetrate very near a mighty spirit, and my soul rushed out in gratitude at his feet. I rose from the thanksgiving, took a resolve, and lay down, unscared, enlightened, eager but for the daylight. That was chapter 35. Anybody got anything to say before we go on to chapter 36? Cheers, FTC. Jane doesn't seem okay. Jane, I swear to God. Everyone's like, Jane! Jane! I mean... All right. It's open to interpretation, but all right, Chase. St. John is killing. I know. I hate St. John so much. I do. They're all, he's a good man. And I'm like, sure he is. By the standards of the day, maybe. You know, Jane's just finding her way. She's doing all right. But, alright, this next chapter is pretty short. So, I say that. Hey, Climbing Dan. That was St. John speaking. Yes, you got that right. Yeah, no, he's like literally just doing all of the most basic, like, look at how nice I am to other people and how mean I am to you, you demon who's gonna go to hell. And look at how kind I can be when it seems like you're doing what I want you to do. Pat, pat, pat on the head. Oh, yes. He's a little. He's a lot. He's a lot. He's Mr. St. John. Don't see that anymore? He is the best of men. He is so good. He is a good and a great man, isn't he? He's so good with his goodness, with his godly goodness. Yeah, you think you know what you want, but you're obviously wrong. You've said no to me somewhere around 100 times, but I'm telling you that I don't think that that's what you want, and I don't think you know what you want, in fact. And in fact, I think you're being tempted by the devil, so perhaps you should doubt everything that you're feeling about this right now, because you are being rather selfish and rather ungodly in your actions right now. And of course, I'm not mad at you. I would never be mad at you. My behavior is not because I am mad at you, Jane. I've forgiven you. My behavior is simply because I want you to do what I want, and it is for your own sake, for God's sake, that I am treating you in this way. I am not mad at you. It's like, okay, moving on. The Reverend Steve Jobs. It's his name, his actual name. It's his actual name. Mm-hmm. And I'm not being manipulative. God let me. I love St. John so much because he's so awful. I hate him, but like I love him as he's written. He's like a very well written character in my opinion. Because like he works so hard to make himself spotless of blame from everyone, but even his sisters know. Even if sisters are like, yeah, but like, Jane, this isn't good for you, and I think St. John can sometimes be a little bit of a dick, so maybe you should be careful. Certainly of reverence, but he's also a very real character. Like, many real people like him who behave exactly like him do exist. I bet he was, Chase. I bet he was. Because he was godly, and that's all you need to be. And, you know, Jane's a woman. Women don't know what they want. Women are stupid. Women can't say. No, they don't. Okay. So, anyways, let's move on with chapter 36, now that we're all feeling better about bashing St. John, and we're getting that out of our systems. The daylight came. I rose at dawn. I busied myself for an hour or two with arranging my things in my chamber, drawers, and wardrobe, in the order wherein I should wish to leave them during a brief absence. Meantime, I heard St. John quit his room. He stopped at my door. I feared he would knock. No, but a slip of paper was passed under the door. I took it up. It bore these words. You left me too suddenly last night. Had you stayed but a little longer, you would have laid your hand on the Christian's cross and the angel's crown. I shall expect your clear decision when I return this day fortnight. Meantime, watch and pray that you enter not into temptation. The spirit, I trust, is willing, but the flesh, I see, is weak. I shall pray for you hourly. Yours, St. John. My spirit, I answered mentally, is willing to do what is right, and my flesh, I hope, is strong enough to accomplish the will of heaven, when once that will is distinctly known to me. At any rate, it shall be strong enough to search, inquire, to grope an outlet from this cloud of doubt, and find the open day of certainty. It was the 1st of June, yet the morning was overcast and chilly. Rain beat fast on my casement. I heard the front door open, and St. John pass out. Looking through the window, I saw him traverse the garden. He took the way over the misty moors in the direction of Whitcross. There he would meet the coach. In a few more hours I shall succeed you in that track, cousin, thought I. I, too, have a coach to meet at Whitcross. I, too, have some to see and ask after in England, before I depart forever. It wanted yet 2 hours of breakfast time. I filled the interval in walking softly about my room and pondering the visitation which had given my plans their present bent. I recalled that inward sensation I had experienced, for I could recall it with all its unspeakable strangeness. I recalled the voice I had heard. Again I questioned whence it came, as vainly as before. It seemed in me, not in the external world. I asked, was it a mere nervous impression, a delusion? I could not conceive or believe. It was more like an inspiration. The wondrous shock of feeling had come like the earthquake which shook the foundations of Paul and Silas's prison. It had opened the doors of the soul's cell and loosed its bands. It had wakened it out of its sleep, whence it sprang trembling, listening, aghast, then vibrated thrice a cry in my startled ear, and in my quaking heart, and through my spirit, which neither feared nor shook, but exulted as if in joy over the success of one effort it had been privileged to make, independent of the cumbrous body. Ere many days, I said, as I terminated my musings, I will know something of him whose voice seemed last night to summon me. Letters have proved of no avail. Personal inquiry shall replace them. At breakfast I announced to Diana and Mary that I was going a journey, and should be absent at least 4 days. Alone, Jane? They asked. Yes, it was to see or hear news of a friend about whom I had for some time been uneasy. They might have said, as I have no doubt they thought, that they had believed me to be without any friends save them, for indeed I had often said so, but with their true natural delicacy they abstained from comment, except that Diana asked me if I was sure I was well enough to travel. I looked very pale, she observed. I replied that nothing ailed me save anxiety of mind, which I hoped soon to alleviate. It was easy to make my further arrangements, for I was troubled with no inquiries, no surmises. Having once explained to them that I could not now be explicit about my plans, they kindly and wisely acquiesced in the silence with which I pursued them, according to me the privilege of free action I should under similar circumstances have accorded them. I left Moor House at 3 o'clock p.m., and soon after 4 I stood at the foot of the signpost of Whitcross, awaiting the arrival of the coach which was to take me to distant Thornfield. Amidst the silence of those solitary roads and desert hills, I heard it approach from a great distance. It was the same vehicle whence, a year ago, I had alighted one summer evening on this very spot. How desolate and hopeless and objectless! It stopped as I beckoned. I entered, not now obliged to part with my whole fortune as the price of its accommodation. Once more on the road to Thornfield, I felt like the messenger pigeon flying home. It was a journey of 36 hours. I had set out from Whitcross on a Tuesday afternoon, and early on the succeeding Thursday morning the coach stopped to water the horses at a wayside inn, situated in the midst of scenery whose green hedges and large fields and low pastoral hills, how mild of feature and verdant of hue compared with the stern North Midland moors of Morton, met my eye like the lineaments of a once familiar face. Yes, I knew the character of this landscape. I was sure we were near my bourne. How far is Thornfield Hall from here? I asked of the ostler. Just 2 miles, ma'am, across the fields. My journey is closed, I thought to myself. I got out of the coach, gave a box I had into the ostler's charge, to be kept till I called for it, paid my fare, satisfied the coachman, and was going. The brightening day gleamed on the sign of the inn, and I read in gilt letters, "The Rochester Arms." My heart leapt up. I was already on my master's very lands. It fell again. The thought struck it. Your master himself may be beyond the British Channel, for aught you know. And then if he is at Thornfield Hall, towards which you hasten, who besides him is there? His lunatic wife, and you have nothing to do with him. You dare not speak to him or seek his presence. You have lost your labor. You had better go no farther. It urged the monitor. Ask information of the people at the inn. They can give you all you seek. They can solve your doubts at once. Go up to that man and inquire if Mr. Rochester be at home. The suggestion was sensible, and yet I could not force myself to act on it. I so dreaded a reply that would crush me with despair. To prolong doubt was to prolong hope. I might yet once more see the hall under the ray of her star. There was the stile before me, the very fields through which I had hurried, blind, deaf, distracted with revengeful fury, tracking and scourging me on the morning I had fled from Thornfield. Ere I well knew what course I had resolved to take, I was in the midst of them. How fast I walked, how I ran sometimes, how I looked forward to catch the first view of the well-known woods. With what feelings I welcomed single trees I knew, and familiar glimpses of meadow and hill between them. At last the woods rose. The rookery clustered dark. A loud cawing broke the morning stillness. Strange delight inspired me. On I hastened. Another field crossed, a lane threaded, and there were the courtyard walls, the back offices, the house itself the rookery still hid. My first view of it shall be in front, I determined, where its bold battlements will strike the eye nobly at once, and where I can single out my master's very window. Perhaps he will be standing at it. He rises early. Perhaps he is now walking in the orchard, or on the pavement in front. Could I but see him! But a moment! Surely, in that case, I should not be so mad as to run to him. I cannot tell. I am not certain. And if I did, what then? God bless him, what then? Who would be hurt by my once more tasting the life his glance can give me? Oh, I rave. Perhaps at this moment he is watching the sun rise over the Pyrenees, or on the tideless sea of the south. I had coasted along the lower wall of the orchard, turned its angle. There was a gate just there, opening into the meadow, between two stone pillars crowned by stone balls. From behind one pillar I could peep round quietly at the full front of the mansion. I advanced my head with precaution, desirous to ascertain if any bedroom window blinds were yet drawn up. Battlements, windows, long front, all from this sheltered station were at my command. The crows sailing overhead perhaps watched me whilst I took this survey. I wonder what they thought. They must have considered I was very careful and timid at first, and that I gradually grew very bold and reckless. A peep, and then a long stare, and then a departure from my niche and a straying out into the meadow, and a sudden stop full in front of the great mansion, and a protracted hardy gaze towards it. What affectation of diffidence was this at first? They might have demanded. What stupid regardlessness now? Here an illustration, reader. A lover finds his mistress asleep on a mossy bank. He wishes to catch a glimpse of her fair face without waking her. He steals softly over the grass, careful to make no sound. He pauses, fancying she has stirred. He withdraws, not for words would he be seen. All is still. He again advances. He bends over her. A light veil rests on her features. He lifts it, bends lower. Now his eyes anticipate the vision of beauty, warm and blooming and lovely in rest. How hurried was their first glance! But how they fix! How he starts! How he suddenly and vehemently clasps in both arms the form he dared not a moment since touch with his finger! How he calls aloud a name, and drops his burden and gazes on it wildly! He thus grasps and cries, and gazes, because he no longer fears to waken by any sound he can utter, by any movement he can make. He thought his love slept sweetly. He finds she is stone dead. I looked with timorous joy towards a stately house. I saw a blackened ruin. No need to cower behind a gate-post, indeed! To peep up at chamber lattices, fearing life was astir behind them! No need to listen for doors opening, to fancy steps on the pavement or the gravel walk! The lawn, the grounds were trodden and waste, the portal yawned void. The front was, as I had once seen it in a dream, but a well-like wall, very high and very fragile-looking, perforated with paneless windows. No roof, no battlements, no chimneys. All had crashed in. And there was the silence of death about it, the solitude of a lonesome wild. No wonder that letters addressed to people here had never received an answer, as well dispatch epistles to a vault in a church aisle. The grim blackness of the stones told by what fate the hall had fallen, by conflagration. But how kindled? What story belonged to this disaster? What loss besides mortar and marble and woodwork had followed upon it? Had life been wrecked as well as property? If so, whose? Dreadful question. There was no one here to answer it, not even dumb sign, mute token. In wandering round the shattered walls and through the devastated interior, I gathered evidence that the calamity was not of late occurrence. Winter snows, I thought, had drifted through that void arch, winter rains beaten in at those hollow casements, for amidst the drenched piles of rubbish spring had cherished vegetation. Grass and weed grew here and there between the stones and fallen rafters. And oh, where meantime was the hapless owner of this wreck? In what land? Under what auspices? My eye involuntarily wandered to the grey church tower near the gates, and I asked, "Is he with Damer de Rochester, sharing the shelter of his narrow marble house?" Some answer must be had to these questions. I could find it nowhere but at the inn, and thither ere long I returned. The host himself brought my breakfast into the parlour. I requested him to shut the door and sit down. I had some questions to ask him. But when he complied, I scarcely knew how to begin, such horror had I of the possible answers. And yet the spectacle of desolation I had just left prepared me in a measure for a tale of misery. The host was a respectable-looking, middle-aged man. "You know Thornfield Hall, of course," I managed to say at last. Yes, ma'am, I lived there once. Did you? Not in my time, I thought. You were a stranger to me. I was the late Mr. Rochester's butler, he added. The late! I seemed to have received with full force the blow I had been trying to evade. The late! I gasped. Is he dead? I mean the present gentleman, Mr. Edward's father, he explained. I breathed again. My blood resumed its flow, fully assured by these words that Mr. Edward, my Mr. Rochester, God bless him wherever he was at least alive, was, in short, the present gentleman. Gladdening words! It seemed I could hear all that was to come, whatever the disclosures might be, with comparative tranquillity. Since he was not in the grave, I could bear, I thought, to learn that he was at the Antipodes. Is Mr. Rochester living at Thornfield Hall now? I asked, knowing, of course, what the answer would be, but yet desirous of deferring the direct question as to where he really was. No, ma'am. Oh, no! No one is living there. I suppose you are a stranger in these parts, or you would have heard what happened last autumn. Thornfield Hall is quite a ruin. It was burnt down just about harvest time. A dreadful calamity. Such an immense quantity of valuable property destroyed, hardly any of the furniture could be saved. The fire broke out at dead of night, and before the engines arrived from Millcote, the building was one mass of flames. It was a terrible spectacle. I witnessed it myself. At dead of night, I muttered. Yes, that was ever the hour of fatality at Thornfield. Was it known how it originated? I demanded. They guessed, ma'am. They guessed. Indeed, I should say it was ascertained beyond a doubt. You are not perhaps aware, he continued, edging a little nearer the table and speaking low, that there was a lady, a lunatic, kept in the house. I have heard something of it. She was kept in close confinement, ma'am. People even for some years was not absolutely certain of her existence. No one saw her. They only knew by rumor that such a person was at the Hall, or who or what she was, it was difficult to conjecture. They said Mr. Edward had brought her from abroad, and some believed she had been his mistress. But a queer thing happened a year since. A very queer thing. I feared now to hear my own story. I endeavored to recall him to the main fact. And this lady? This lady, ma'am, he answered, turned out to be Mr. Rochester's wife. The discovery was brought about in the strangest way. There was a young lady, a governess at the Hall, that Mr. Rochester fell in— But the fire, I suggested. I'm coming to that, ma'am. That Mr. Edward fell in love with. The servants say they never saw anybody so much in love as he was. He was after her continually. They used to watch him. Servants will, you know, ma'am. And he set store on her past everything. For all, nobody but him thought her so very handsome. She was a little small thing, they say, almost like a child. I never saw her myself, but I've heard Leah, the housemaid, tell of her. Leah liked her well enough. Mr. Rochester was about 40, and this governess was not 20, and you see, when gentlemen of his age fall in love with girls, they are often like as if they were bewitched. Well, he would marry her. You shall tell me this part of the story another time, I said, but now I have a particular reason for wishing to hear all about the fire. Was it suspected that this lunatic, Mrs. Rochester, had any hand in it? You've hit it, ma'am. It's quite certain that it was her, and nobody but her, that set it going. She had a woman to take care of her called Mrs. Poole, an able woman in her line and very trustworthy, but for one fault, a fault common to a deal of them nurses and matrons. She kept a private bottle of gin by her, and now and then took a drop over much. It is excusable, for she had a hard life of it, but still it was dangerous, for when Mrs. Poole was fast asleep after the gin and water, the mad lady, who was as cunning as a witch, would take the keys out of her pocket, let herself out of her chamber, and go roaming about the house, doing any wild mischief that came into her mind. They say she had nearly burnt her husband in his bed once, but I don't know about that. However, on this night, she set fire first to the hangings of the room next her own, and then she got down to a lower story and made her way to the chamber that had been the governess's. She was like as if she knew somehow how matters had gone on, and had a spite at her. And she kindled the bed there, but there was nobody sleeping in it, fortunately. The governess had run away 2 months before, and for all Mr. Rochester sought her as if she had been the most precious thing he had in the world, he never could hear a word of her, and he grew savage, quite savage on his disappointment. He never was a wild man, but he got dangerous after he lost her. He would be alone, too. He sent Mrs. Fairfax, the housekeeper, away to her friends at a distance. But he did it handsomely, for he settled an annuity on her for life. And she deserved it. She was a very good woman. Miss Adele, a ward he had, was put to school. He broke off acquaintance with all the gentry, and shut himself up like a hermit at the Hall. What? Did he not leave England? Leave England? Bless you, no! He would not cross the doorstones of the house except at night, when he walked just like a ghost about the grounds and in the orchard, as if he had lost his senses, which it is my opinion he had, for a more spirited, bolder, keener gentleman than he was before that midge of a governess crossed him, you never saw, ma'am. He was not a man given to wine or cards or racing as some are, and he was not so very handsome, but he had a courage and a will of his own, if ever man had. I knew him from a boy, you see, and for my part I have often wished that Miss Eyre had been sunk in the sea before she came to Thornfield Hall.
Then Mr. Rochester was at home when the fire broke out?
Yes, indeed was he, and he went up to the attics when all was burning above and below, and got the servants out of their beds, and helped them down himself, and went back to get his mad wife out of her cell. And then they called out to him that she was on the roof, where she was standing, waving her arms above the battlements and shouting out till they could hear her a mile off. I saw her and heard her with my own eyes. She was a big woman and had long black hair. We could see it streaming against the flames as she stood. I witnessed, and several more witnessed, Mr. Rochester ascend through the skylight onto the roof. We heard him call, "Bertha!" We saw him approach her, and then, ma'am, she yelled and gave a spring, and the next minute she lay smashed on the pavement.
Dead?
Dead. Aye, dead as the stones on which her brains and blood were scattered.
Good God!
You may well say so, ma'am. It was frightful.
He shuddered. And afterwards? I urged.
Well, ma'am, afterwards the house was burnt to the ground. There are only some bits of wall standing now.
Were any other lives lost?
No. Perhaps it would have been better if there had.
What do you mean?
Poor Mr. Edward, he ejaculated. I little thought ever to have seen it. Some say it was just a just judgment on him for keeping his first marriage secret and wanting to take another wife while he had one living, but I pity him for my part.
You said he was alive, I exclaimed.
Yes, yes, he is alive, but many think he had better be dead.
Why? How? My blood was again running cold. Where is he? I demanded. Is he in England?
Aye, he's in England. He can't get out of England, I fancy. He's a fixture now.
What agony was this? And the man seemed resolved to protract it.
He is stone blind, he said at last. Yes, he is stone blind, is Mr. Edward.
I had dreaded worse. I had dreaded he was mad. I summoned strength to ask what had caused this calamity.
It was all his own courage, and a body may say his kindness in a way, ma'am. He wouldn't leave the house till everyone else was out before him. As he came down the great staircase at last, after Miss Rochester had flung herself from the battlements, there was a great crash. All fell. He was taken out from under the ruins alive, but sadly hurt. A beam had fallen in such a way as to protect him partly, but one eye was knocked out, and one hand so crushed that Mr. Carter, the surgeon, had to amputate it directly. The other eye inflamed. He lost the sight of that also. He is now helpless indeed, blind and a cripple.
Where is he? Where does he now live?
At Ferndean, a manor house on a farm he has, about 30 miles off. Quite a desolate spot.
Who is with him?
Old John and his wife. He would have none else. He's quite broken down, they say.
Have you any sort of a conveyance?
We have a chaise, ma'am, a very handsome chaise.
Let it be got ready instantly. And if your post-boy can drive me to Ferndean before dark this day, I'll pay both you and him twice the hire you usually demand.
Bam! Bet y'all didn't see that coming. Bet you did not see that coming.
Except for Chase, because Chase has read the book. And whoever else has read the book. But that was chapter 36. I am going to,
Yeesh.
Yeah, don't like the whole fate worse than death is being blind and a cripple situation. That's pretty rude. Let's be real. But poor Mr. Rochester. This is a lot of, for him, this is a lot of negative things to happen in the span of, like, what, 3 months? His lady runs off. I guess he got the wonderful thing of his wife dying since he didn't like her, but this guy was pretty rude in general. Let's be real. Well, but he was having such fun telling the story. He was having such a good time. I was having a good time reading his story. Yeah, he was totally the... But that's what they do. They're like, listen to this gossip. Ain't it horrible? I ain't never seen nothing like it. I saw her brain smashed on the pavement. Okay. Okay, sir. Now, I am going to... Listen, I know my accents aren't accurate, but they just need to suggest an image of a person. That's all they need to do. That's all they need to do, Harvest. I'm going to briefly be right back so that I can use the restroom. It worked well. Good. Good, I'm glad. They certainly do. Good. Is that finished? It has not been finished yet, nay. But I'm going to briefly be right back. I'm going to use the restroom, and then we're going to come back and finish up with chapter 37. So feel free to discuss on your own how you feel about all that has happened while I am gone. This is going to be, like, weirdly happy music. I feel like I should find some sad music to put on, because, like, it doesn't seem right to leave you guys with such happy music. Let's see. Reading music, instrumental. Sure, well, just some piano. Dawn, hey! Welcome back. Thank you for resubscribing. Welcome back to the fold. We've just finished with chapter 36. We're about to start on chapter 37. I am going to use the restroom. Could be a happy moment still. Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. Well, chapter 37 could be. Chapter 36 was maybe not. Anyways, be right back. I'm using the restroom.
I'll support you.
forest leaves was the only sound audible in its vicinage. "Can there be life here?" I asked. Yes, life of some kind there was, for I heard a movement. That narrow front door was unclosing, and some shape was about to issue from the grange. It opened slowly. A figure came out into the twilight and stood on the step. A man without a hat. He stretched forth his hand as if to feel whether it rained. Dusk as it was, I had recognized him. It was my master, Edward Fairfax Rochester, and no other. I stayed my step, almost my breath, and stood to watch him, to examine him, myself unseen, and, alas, to him invisible. It was a sudden meeting, and one in which rapture was kept well in check by pain. I had no difficulty in restraining my voice from exclamation, my step from hasty advance. His form was of the same strong and stalwart contour as ever. His port was still erect. His hair was still raven black, nor were his features altered or sunk. Not in 1 year's space, by any sorrow, could his athletic strength be quelled or his vigorous prime blighted. But in his countenance I saw a change. That looked desperate and brooding. That reminded me of some wronged and fettered wild beast or bird, dangerous to approach in his sullen woe. The caged eagle, whose gold-ringed eyes cruelty has extinguished, might look as looked that sightless Samson. And, reader, do you think I feared him in his blind ferocity? If you do, you little know me. A soft hope blessed with my sorrow that soon I should dare to drop a kiss on that brow of rock, and on those lips so sternly sealed beneath it. But not yet. I would not accost him yet. He descended the one step, and advanced slowly and gropingly towards the grass plat. Where was his daring stride now? Then he paused, as if he knew not which direction to turn. He lifted his hand and opened his eyelids, gazed blank and with a straining effort on the sky, and toward the amphitheater of trees. One saw that all to him was void darkness. He stretched his right hand, the left arm, the mutilated one, he kept hidden in his bosom. He seemed to wish by touch to gain an idea of what lay around him. He met but vacancy still, for the trees were some yards off where he stood. He relinquished the endeavor, folded his arms, and stood quiet and mute in the rain, now falling fast on his uncovered head. At this moment John approached him from some quarter. "Will you take my arm, sir?" he said. "There is a heavy shower coming on. Had you not better go in?" "Let me alone," was the answer. John withdrew without having observed me. Mr. Rochester now tried to walk about. Vainly. All was too uncertain. He groped his way back to the house, and, re-entering it, closed the door. I now drew near and knocked. John's wife opened for me. "Mary," I said, "how are you?" She started as if she had seen a ghost. I calmed her. To her hurried, "Is it really you, miss? Come at this late hour to this lonely place?" I answered by taking her hand, and then I followed her into the kitchen, where John now sat by a good fire. I explained to them in few words that I had heard all which had happened since I left Thornfield, and that I had come to see Mr. Rochester. I asked John to go down to the turnpike house where I had dismissed the chaise, and bring my trunk which I had left there, and then, while I removed my bonnet and shawl, I questioned Mary as to whether I could be accommodated at the manor house for the night, and finding that arrangements to that effect, though difficult, would not be impossible, I informed her I should stay. Just at this moment the parlor bell rang. "When you go in," said I, "tell your master that a person wishes to speak to him, but do not give him my name." "I don't think he will see you," she answered. "He refuses everybody." When she returned I inquired what he had said. "You are to send in your name and your business," she replied. She then proceeded to fill a glass with water and place it on a tray, together with candles. "Is that what he rang for?" I asked. "Yes. He always has candles brought in at dark, though he is blind." "Give the tray to me. I will carry it in." I took it from her hand. She pointed me out the parlor door. The tray shook as I held it. The water spilt from the glass. My heart struck my ribs loud and fast. Mary opened the door for me and shut it behind me. This parlor looked gloomy. A neglected handful of fire burnt low in the grate, and leaning over it, with his head supported against the high, old-fashioned mantelpiece, appeared the blind tenant of the room. His old dog, Pilot, lay on one side, removed out of the way, and coiled up as if afraid of being inadvertently trodden upon. Pilot pricked up his ears when I came in. Then he jumped up with a yelp and a whine, and bounded towards me. He almost knocked the tray from my hands. I set it on the table, then patted him and said softly, "Lie down." Mr. Rochester turned mechanically to see what the commotion was, but as he saw nothing, he returned and sighed. "Give me the water, Mary," he said. I approached him with the now only half-filled glass. Pilot followed me, still excited. "What is the matter?" he inquired. "Down, Pilot," I again said. He checked the water on its way to his lips, and seemed to listen. He drank, and put the glass down. "This is you, Mary, is it not?" "Mary is in the kitchen," I answered. He put out his hand with a quick gesture, but not seeing where I stood, he did not touch me. "Who is this? Who is this?" he demanded, trying, as it seemed, to see with those sightless eyes, unavailing and distressing attempt. "Answer me! Speak again!" he ordered, imperiously and aloud. "Will you have a little more water, sir? I spilt half of what was in the glass," I said. "Who is it? What is it? Who speaks?" "Pilot knows me, and John and Mary know I am here. I came only this evening," I answered. "Great God! What delusion has come over me? What sweet madness has seized me?" "No delusion, no madness. Your mind, sir, is too strong for delusion, your health too sound for frenzy." "And where is the speaker? Is it only a voice? Oh, I cannot see, but I must feel, or my heart will stop and my brain burst. Whoever you are, be perceptible to the touch, or I cannot live." He groped. I arrested his wandering hand and prisoned it in both mine. "Her very fingers!" he cried. "Her small, slight fingers! If so, there must be more of her." The muscular hand broke from my custody. My arm was seized, my shoulder, neck, waist. I was entwined and gathered to him. "Is it Jane? What is it? This is her shape, this is her size." "And this her voice," I added. "She is all here, her heart too. God bless you, sir. I am so glad to be near you again." "Jane Eyre! Jane Eyre!" was all he said. "My dear master," I answered, "I am Jane Eyre. I have found you out. I am come back to you." "In truth? In the flesh? My living Jane?" "You touch me, sir. You hold me, and fast enough. I am not cold like a corpse, nor vacant like air, am I?" "My living darling, these are certainly her limbs, and these her features. But I cannot be so blessed after all my misery. It is a dream. Such dreams as I have had at night when I have clasped her once more to my heart as I do now, and kissed her as thus, and felt that she loved me, and trusted she would not leave me. Which I never will, sir, from this day. Never will, says the vision. But I always woke and found it an empty mockery, and I was desolate and abandoned, my life dark, lonely, hopeless, my soul athirst and forbidden to drink, my heart famished and never to be fed. Gentle, soft dream, nestling in my arms now, you will fly, too, as your sisters have all fled before you. But kiss me before you go. Embrace me, Jane. There, sir, and there. I pressed my lips to his once brilliant and now rayless eyes. I swept his hair from his brow and kissed that, too. He suddenly seemed to arouse himself. The conviction of the reality of all this seized him. "It is you. Is it, Jane? You are come back to me, then?" "I am." "And you do not lie dead in some ditch under some stream, and you are not a pining outcast among strangers. No, sir, I am an independent woman now." "Independent? What do you mean, Jane?" "My uncle in Madeira is dead, and he left me £5,000. "Ah, this is practical. This is real," he cried. "I should never dream that. Besides, there is that peculiar voice of hers, so animating and piquant as well as soft. It cheers my withered heart. It puts life into it. What, Janet, are you an independent woman, a rich woman? If you won't let me live with you, I can build a house of my own close up to your door, and you may come and sit in my parlor when you want company of an evening." "But as you are rich, Jane, you have now, no doubt, friends who will look after you, and not suffer you to devote yourself to a blind lamenter like me." "I told you I am independent, sir, as well as rich. I am my own mistress." "And you will stay with me?" "Certainly, unless you object. I will be your neighbor, your nurse, your housekeeper. I will find you lonely. I will be your companion, to read to you, to walk with you, to sit with you, to wait on you, to be eyes and hands to you. Cease to look so melancholy, my dear master. You shall not be left desolate so long as I live." He replied not. He seemed serious, abstracted. He sighed. He half opened his lips as if to speak. He closed them again. I felt a little embarrassed, Perhaps I had too rashly overleaped conventionalities, and he, like St. John, saw impropriety in my inconsiderateness. I had indeed made my proposal from the idea that he wished and would ask me to be his wife, an expectation not the less certain because unexpressed had buoyed me up that he would claim me at once as his own, but no hint to that effect escaping him and his countenance become more overcast, I suddenly remembered that I might have been all wrong, and was perhaps playing the fool unwittingly, and I began gently to withdraw myself from his arms. But he eagerly snatched me closer. "No, no, Jane, you must not go. No! I have touched you, heard you, felt the comfort of your presence, the sweetness of your consolation. I cannot give up these joys. I have little left in myself. I must have you. The world may laugh, may call me absurd, selfish, but it does not signify. My very soul demands you. It will be satisfied, or it will take deadly vengeance on its frame." "Well, sir, I will stay with you. I have said so." "Yes, but you understand one thing by staying with me, and I understand another. You, perhaps, could make up your mind to be about my hand and chair, to wait on me as a kind little nurse, for you have an affectionate heart and a generous spirit which prompt you to make sacrifices for those you pity, and that ought to suffice for me, no doubt. I suppose I should now entertain none but fatherly feelings for you. Do you think so? Come, tell me." "I will think what you like, sir. I am content to be only your nurse, if you think it better." "But you cannot always be my nurse, Janet. You are young. You must marry one day." "I don't care about being married." "You should care, Janet. If I were what I once was, I would try to make you care, but a sightless block." He relapsed again into gloom. I, on the contrary, became more cheerful, and took fresh courage. These last words gave me an insight as to where the difficulty lay, and as it was no difficulty with me, I felt quite relieved from my previous embarrassment. I resumed a livelier vein of conversation. It is time someone undertook to rehumanize you," said I, parting his thick and long uncut locks, "for I see you are being metamorphosed into a lion, or something of that sort. You have a faux air of Nebuchadnezzar in the fields about you, that is certain. Your hair reminds me of eagles' feathers, whether your nails are grown like birds' claws or not. I have not yet noticed." "On this arm I have neither hand nor nails," he said, drawing the mutilated limb from his breast and showing it to me. "It is a mere stump, a ghastly sight. Don't you think so, Jane?" "It is a pity to see it, and a pity to see your eyes, and the scar of fire on your forehead. And the worst of it is, one is in danger of loving you too well for all this, and making too much of you." "I thought you would be revolted, Jane, when you saw my arm, and my cicatrized visage." "Did you? Don't tell me so, lest I should say something disparaging to your judgment. Now let me leave you an instant to make a better fire and have the hearth swept up. Can you tell when there is a good fire?" "Yes, with the right eye I see a glow, a ruddy haze." "And you see the candles?" "Very dimly. Each is a luminous cloud." "Can you see me?" "No, my fairy, but I am only too thankful to hear and feel you." "When do you take supper?" "I never take supper." "But you shall have some tonight. I am hungry. So are you, I dare say, only you forget." Summoning Mary, I soon had the room in more cheerful order. I prepared him likewise a comfortable repast. My spirits were excited, and with pleasure and ease I talked to him during supper, and for a long time after. There was no harassing restraint, no repressing of glee and vivacity with him, for with him I was at perfect ease, because I knew I suited him. All I said or did seemed either to console or revive him. Delightful consciousness! It brought to life and light my whole nature. In his presence I thoroughly lived, and he lived in mine. Blind as he was, smiles played over his face, joy dawned on his forehead, his lineaments softened and warmed. After supper he began to ask me many questions of where I had been, what I had been doing, how I had found him out, but I gave him only very partial replies. It was too late to enter into particulars that night. Besides, I wished to touch no deep thrilling chord, to open no fresh well of emotion in his heart. My sole present aim was to cheer him. Cheered, as I have said, he was, and yet but by fits. If a moment's silence broke the conversation, he would turn, restless, touch me, and then say, "Jane." "You are altogether a human being, Jane. You are certain of that?" "I conscientiously believe so, Mr. Rochester." "Yet how, on this dark and doleful evening, could you have so suddenly rise on my lone hearth? I stretched my hand to take a glass of water from a hireling, and it was given me by you. I asked a question expecting John's wife to answer me, and your voice spoke at my ear. Because I had come in Mary's stead with the tray. And there is enchantment in the very hour I am now spending with you. Who can tell what a dark, dreary, hopeless life I have dragged on for months past, doing nothing, expecting nothing, merging night and day, feeling but the sensation of cold when I let the fire go out, of hunger when I forgot to eat, and then a ceaseless sorrow, and at times a very delirium of desire to behold my Jane again. Yes, for her restoration I longed, far more than for that of my lost sight. How can it be that Jane is with me and says she loves me? Will she not depart as suddenly as she came? Tomorrow I fear I shall find her no more. A commonplace, practical reply, out of the train of his own disturbed ideas, was, I was sure, the best and most reassuring for him in this frame of mind. I passed my finger over his eyebrows and remarked that they were scorched, and that I would apply something which would make them grow as broad and black as ever. Where is the use of doing me good in any way, beneficent spirit, when at some fatal moment you will again desert me, passing like a shadow, whither and how to me unknown, and for me remaining afterwards undiscoverable? Have you a pocket-comb about you, sir? What for, Jane? Just to comb out this shaggy black hair mane. I find you rather alarming when I examine you close at hand. You talk of my being a fairy, but I am sure you are more like a brownie. Am I hideous, Jane? Very, sir. You always were, you know. Humph! The wickedness has not been taken out of you, wherever you have sojourned. Yet I have been with good people, far better than you, 100 times better people, possessed of ideas and views you never entertained in your life, quite more refined and exalted. Who the deuce have you been with? If you twist in that way you will make me pull the hair out of your head, and then I think you will cease to entertain doubts of my substantiality. Who have you been with, Jane? You shall not get it out of me tonight, sir. You must wait till tomorrow. To leave my tale half told will, you know, be a sort of security that I shall appear at your breakfast table to finish it. By the by, I must mind not to rise on your hearth with only a glass of water then. I must bring an egg at the least, to say nothing of fried ham. You mocking changeling, fairy-born and human-bred! You make me feel as if I have not felt these 12 months. If Saul could have had you for his David, the evil spirit would have been exorcised without the aid of the harp. There, sir, you are redd up and made decent. Now I'll leave you. I have been travelling these last 3 days, and I believe I am tired. Good night. Just one word, dame. Were there only ladies in the house where you have been? I laughed and made my escape, still laughing as I ran upstairs. A good idea, I thought with glee. I see I have the means of fretting him out of his melancholy for some time to come. Very early the next morning, I heard him up and astir, wandering from one room to another. As soon as Mary came down, I heard the question, "Is Miss Eyre here?" Then, "Which room did you put her into? Was it dry? Is she up? Go and ask if she wants anything, and when she will come down." I came down as soon as I thought there was a prospect of breakfast. Entering the room very softly, I had a view of him before he discovered my presence. It was mournful indeed to witness the subjugation of that vigorous spirit to a corporeal infirmity. He sat in his chair, still but not at rest, expectant evidently, the lines of now habitual sadness marking his strong features. His countenance reminded one of a lamp quenched, waiting to be relit. And alas, it was not himself that could now kindle the lustre of animated expression. He was dependent on another for that office. I had meant to be gay and careless, but the powerlessness of the strong man touched my heart to the quick. Still I accosted him with what vivacity I could. "It is a bright sunny morning, sir," I said. "The rain is over and gone, and there is a tender shining after it. You shall have a walk soon." I had wakened the glow. His features beamed. "Oh, you are indeed there, my skylark! Come to me. You are not gone, not vanished. I heard one of your kind an hour ago, singing high over the wood. But its song had no music for me, any more than the rising sun had rays. All the melody on earth is concentrated in my Jane's tongue to my ear. I am glad it is not naturally a silent one. All the sunshine I can feel is in her presence." The water stood in my eyes to hear this avowal of his dependence, just as if a royal eagle chained to a perch should be forced to entreat a sparrow to become its purveyor. But I would not be lachrymose. I dashed off the salt drops and busied myself with preparing breakfast. Most of the morning was spent in the open air. I led him out of the wet and wild woods into some cheerful fields. I described to him how brilliantly green they were, how the flowers and hedges looked refreshed, how sparklingly blue was the sky. I sought a seat for him in a hidden and lovely spot, a dry stump of a tree, nor did I refuse to let him, when seated, place me on his knee. Why should I, when both he and I were happier near than apart? Pilate lay beside us. All was quiet. He broke out suddenly while clasping me in his arms. "Cruel, cruel deserter! Oh, Jane, what did I feel when I discovered you had fled from Thornfield, and when I could nowhere find you, and after examining your apartment ascertained that you had taken no money, nor anything which could serve as an equivalent. A pearl necklace I had given you lay untouched in its little casket. Your trunks were left corded and locked as they had been prepared for the bridal tour. What could my darling do, I asked, left destitute and penniless? And what did she do? Let me hear now." Thus urged, I began the narrative of my experience for the last year. I softened considerably what related to the 3 days of wandering and starvation, because to have told him all would have been to inflict unnecessary pain. The little I did say lacerated his faithful heart deeper than I wished. I should not have left him thus, he said, without any measure of making my way. I should have told him my intention. I should have confided in him. He would never have forced me to be his mistress. Violent as he had seemed in his despair, he, in truth, loved me far too well and too tenderly to constitute himself my tyrant. He would have given me half his fortune without demanding so much as a kiss in return, rather than I should have flung myself friendless on the wide world. I had endured, he was certain, more than I had confessed to him. "Well, whatever my sufferings had been, they were very short," I answered, and then I proceeded to tell him how I had been received at Moor House, how I had obtained the office of schoolmistress, and etc. The accession of fortune, the discovery of my relations, followed in due order. Of course, St. John Rivers's name came in frequently in the progress of my tale. When I had done, that name was immediately taken up. "This, St. John, then, is your cousin?" "Yes." "You have spoken of him often. Do you like him?" "He was a very good man, sir. I could not help but liking him." "A good man. Does that mean a respectable, well-conducted man of 50, or what does it mean?" "St. John was only 29, sir." "Jeune encore, as the French say. Is he a person of low stature, phlegmatic and plain? A person whose goodness consists rather in his guiltlessness of vice than in his prowess in virtue? He is untiringly active. Great and exalted deeds are what he lives to perform." "But his brain! That is probably rather soft. He means well, but you shrug your shoulders to hear him talk." "He talks little, sir. What he does say is ever to the point. His brain is first-rate. I should think not impressible, but vigorous." "Is he an able man, then?" "Truly able. A thoroughly educated man. St. John is an accomplished and profound scholar. His manners, I think, you said, are not to your taste, priggish and parsonic?" "I never mentioned his manners, but unless I had a very bad taste, they must suit it. They are polished, calm, and gentlemanlike." "His appearance. I forget what description you gave of his appearance. A sort of raw curate, half strangled with his white neckcloth, and stilted up on his thick-soled high-lows, eh?" "St. John dresses well. He is a handsome man, tall, fair, with blue eyes and a Grecian profile." Aside. "Damn him." To me. "Did you like him, Jane?" "Yes, Mr. Rochester, I liked him. But you asked me that before." I perceived, of course, the drift of my interlocutor. Jealousy had got hold of him. She stung him, but the sting was salutary. It gave him respite from the gnawing fang of melancholy. I would not, therefore, immediately charm the snake. "Perhaps you would rather not sit any longer on my knee, Miss Eyre," was the next somewhat unexpected observation. "Why not, Mr. Rochester?" "The picture you have just drawn is suggestive of rather too overwhelming contrast. Your words have delineated very prettily a graceful Apollo. He is present to your imagination. Tall, fair, blue-eyed, and with a Grecian profile. Your eyes dwell on a Vulcan, a real blacksmith, brown, broad-shouldered, and blind and lame into the bargain." "I never thought of it before, but you certainly are rather like Vulcan, sir." "You can leave me, ma'am, but before you go," and he retained me by a firmer grasp than ever, "you will be pleased just to answer me a question or two." He paused. "What questions, Mr. Rochester?" Then followed this cross-examination. "St. John made you schoolmistress of Morton before he knew you were his cousin?" "Yes." "You would often see him? He would visit the school sometimes?" "Daily." "He would approve of your plans, Jane? I know they would be clever, for you are a talented creature. He approved of them, yes. He would discover many things in you he could not have expected to find. Some of your accomplishments are not ordinary. I don't know about that. You had a little cottage near the school, you say. Did he ever come there to see you? Now and then. Of an evening? Once or twice. A pause. How long did you reside with him and his sisters after the cousinship was discovered? 5 months. Did Rivers spend much time with the ladies of his family? Yes, the back parlor was both his study and ours. He sat near the window, and we by the table. Did he study much? A good deal. What? Hindostani. And what did you do meantime? I learned German at first. Did he teach you? He did not understand German. Did he teach you nothing? A little Hindostani. Rivers taught you Hindostani? Yes, sir. And his sisters also? No. Only you? Only me. Did you ask to learn? No. He wished to teach you? Yes. A second pause. Why did he wish it? Of what use could Hindostani be to you? He intended me to go with him to India. Ah, here I reach the root of the matter. He wanted you to marry him. He asked me to marry him. That is a fiction, an impudent invention to vex me. I beg your pardon. It is the literal truth. He asked me more than once, and was as stiff about urging his point as ever you could be. Miss Eyre, I repeat, you can leave me. How often am I to say the same thing? Why do you remain pertinaciously perched on my knee when I have given you notice to quit? Because I'm comfortable there. No, Jane, you are not comfortable there, because your heart is not with me. It is with this cousin, this St. John. Oh, till this moment I thought my little Jane was all mine. I had a belief she loved me even when she left me. That was an atom of sweet and much bitter. Long as we have parted, hot tears as I have wept over our separation, I never thought that while I was mourning her, she was loving another. But it is useless grieving. Jane, leave me. Go and marry Rivers. Shake me off, then, sir. Push me away, for I'll not leave you of my own accord. Jane, I ever like your tone of voice. It still renews hope. It sounds so truthful. When I hear it, it carries me back a year. I forget that you have formed a new tie. But I am not a fool. Go. Where must I go, sir? Your own way, with the husband you have chosen. Who is that? You know, the St. John Rivers. He is not my husband, nor ever will be. He does not love me. I do not love him. He loves, as he can love, and that is not as you love, a beautiful young lady called Rosamond. He wanted to marry me only because he thought I should make a suitable missionary's wife, which she would not have done. He is good and great, but severe, and for me cold as an iceberg. He is not like you, sir. I am not happy at his side, nor near him, nor with him. He has no indulgence for me, no fondness. He sees nothing attractive in me, not even youth, only a few useful mental points. Then I must leave you, sir, to go to him? I shuddered involuntarily and clung instinctively closer to my blind but beloved master. He smiled. What, Jane, is this true? Is such really the state of matters between you and Rivers? Absolutely, sir. Oh, you need not be jealous. I wanted to tease you a little, to make you less sad. I thought anger would be better than grief. But if you wish me to love you, could you but see how much I do love you, you would be proud and content. All my heart is yours, sir. It belongs to you, and with you it would remain, were fate to exile the rest of me from your presence forever. Again, as he kissed me, painful thoughts darkened his aspect. My seared vision, my crippled strength, he murmured regretfully. I caressed in order to soothe him. I knew of what he was thinking and wanted to speak for him, but dared not. As he turned aside his face a minute, I saw a tear slide from under the sealed eyelid and trickle down the manly cheek. My heart swelled. I am no better than the old lightning-struck chestnut tree in Thornfield Orchard, he remarked ere long. And what right would that ruin have to bid a budding woodbine to cover its decay with freshness? You are no ruin, sir, no lightning-struck tree. You are green and vigorous. Plants will grow about your roots, whether you ask them or not, because they take delight in your bountiful shadow. And as they grow, they will lean towards you and wind around you, because your strength offers them so safe a prop. Again he smiled. I gave him comfort. You speak of friends, Jane? He asked. Yes, of friends, I answered rather hesitatingly, for I knew I meant more than friends, but could not tell what other word to employ. He helped me. "Ah, Jane, but I want a wife." "Do you, sir?" "Yes. Is it news to you?" "Of course. You said nothing about it before." "Is it unwelcome news?" "That depends on circumstances, sir. On your choice." "Which you shall make for me, Jane. I will abide by your decision." "Choose then, sir, her who loves you best." "I will at least choose her I love best." "Jane, will you marry me?" "Yes, sir." "A poor blind man whom you will have to lead about by the hand?" "Yes, sir." "A crippled man, 20 years older than you, whom you will have to wait on?" "Yes, sir." "Truly, Jane?" "Most truly, sir." "Oh, my darling, God bless you and reward you!" "Mr. Rochester, if ever I did a good deed in my life, if ever I thought a good thought, if ever I prayed a sincere and blameless prayer, if ever I wished a righteous wish, I am rewarded now. To be your wife is, for me, to be as happy as I can be on earth." "Because you delight in sacrifice." "Sacrifice? What do I sacrifice? Famine for food, expectation for content. To be privileged to put my arms round what I value, to press my lips to what I love, to repose on what I trust, is that to make a sacrifice? If so, then, certainly I delight in sacrifice." "And to bear with my infirmities, Jane, to overlook my deficiencies." "Which are none, sir, to me. I love you better now, when I can really be useful to you, than I did in your state of proud independence, when you disdained every part but that of the giver and protector. Hitherto I have hated to be helped, to be led. Henceforth I feel I shall hate it no more. I did not like to put my hand into a hireling's, but it is pleasant to feel it circled by Jane's little fingers. I preferred utter loneliness to the constant attendance of servants, but Jane's soft ministry will be a perpetual joy. Jane suits me. Do I suit her?" "To the finest fibre of my nature, sir." "The case being so, we have nothing in the world to wait for. We must be married instantly." He looked and spoke with eagerness. His old impetuosity was rising. "We must become one flesh without any delay, Jane. There is but the license to get. Then we marry." "Mr. Rochester, I have just discovered the sun is far declined from its meridian, and Pilot has actually gone home to his dinner. Let me look at your watch." "Fasten it to your girdle, Jane, and keep it henceforward. I have no use for it." "It is nearly 4 o'clock in the afternoon, sir. Don't you feel hungry?" "The 3rd day from this must be our wedding day, Jane. Never mind fine clothes and jewels now. All of that is not worth a fillip." "The sun has dried up all the raindrops, sir. The breeze is still. It is quite hot." "Do you know, Jane, I have your little pearl necklace at this moment fastened round my bronze scrag under my cravat. I have worn it since the day I lost my only treasure, as a memento of her. We will go home through the wood. That will be the shadiest way." He pursued his own thoughts without heeding me. "Jane, you think me, I dare say, an irreligious dog, but my heart swells with gratitude to the beneficent God of this earth just now. He sees not as man sees, but far clearer, judges not as man judges, but far more wisely. I did wrong. I would have sullied my innocent flower, breathed guilt on its purity. The Omnipotent snatched it from me. I, in my stiff-necked rebellion, almost cursed the dispensation. Instead of bending it to the decree, I defied it. Divine justice pursued its course. Disasters came thick on me. I was forced to pass through the valley of the shadow of death. His chastisements are mighty, and one smote me which has humbled me forever. You know I was proud of my strength. But what is it now, when I must give it over to foreign guidance, as a child does its weakness? Of late, Jane, only of late, I began to see and acknowledge the hand of God in my doom. I began to experience remorse, repentance, the wish for reconcilement to my Maker. I began sometimes to pray. Very brief prayers they were, but very sincere. Some days since, nay, I can number them, 4, it was last Monday night, a singular mood came over me, one in which grief replaced frenzy, sorrow, sullenness. I had long had the impression that since I could nowhere find you, you must be dead. Late that night, perhaps it might be between 11 and 12 o'clock, ere I retired to my dreary rest, I supplicated God that, if it seemed good to him, I might soon be taken from this life and admitted to that world to come, where there was still hope of rejoining Jane. I was in my own room and sitting by the window, which was open. It soothed me to feel the balmy night air, though I could see no stars, and only by a vague luminous haze knew the presence of a moon. I longed for thee, Janet. Oh, I longed for thee both with soul and flesh. I asked of God at once in anguish and humility, if I had not been long enough desolate, afflicted, tormented, and might not soon taste bliss and peace once more. That I merited all I endured, I acknowledged. That I could scarcely endure more, I pleaded, and the alpha and omega of my heart's wishes broke involuntarily from my lips in the words, Jane, Jane, Jane. Did you speak these words aloud? I did, Jane. If any listener had heard me, he would have thought me mad. I pronounced them with such frantic energy. And it was last Monday night, somewhere near midnight. Yes, but the time is of no consequence. What followed is the strange point. You will think me superstitious. Some superstition I have in my blood, and always had. Nevertheless, this is true. True at least it is that I heard what I now relate. As I exclaimed, Jane, 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 a voice, I cannot tell whence the voice came, but I know whose voice it was, replied, I am coming, wait for me, and a moment after went whispering on the wind the words, Where are you? I tell you, if I can, the idea, the picture these words open to my mind, yet it is difficult to express what I want to express. Ferndean is buried, as you see, in a heavy wood, where sound falls dull and dies unreverberating. Where are you seemed spoken amongst mountains, for I heard a hill-sent echo repeat the words. Cooler and fresher at the moment the gale seemed to visit my brow. I could have deemed that in some wild, lone scene I and Jane were meeting. In spirit, I believe we must have met. You no doubt were at that hour in unconscious sleep, Jane. Perhaps your soul wandered from its cell to comfort mine, for those were your accents. As certain as I live, they were yours. Reader, it was on a Monday night, near midnight, that I too had received the mysterious summons. Those were the very words by which I replied to it. I listened to Mr. Rochester's narrative, but made no disclosure in return. The coincidence struck me as too awful and inexplicable to be communicated or discussed. If I told anything, my tale would be such as must necessarily make a profound impression on the mind of my hearer, and that mind, yet from its sufferings too prone to gloom, needed not the deeper shade of the supernatural. I kept these things then, and pondered them in my heart. You cannot now wonder, continued my master, that when you rose upon me so unexpectedly last night, I had difficulty in believing you any other than a mere voice and vision, something that would melt to silence and annihilation as the midnight whisper and mountain echo had melted before. Now, I thank God, I know it to be otherwise. Yes, I thank God. He put me off his knee, rose, and reverently lifting his hat from his brow, bending his sightless eyes to the earth, he stood in mute devotion. Only the last words of the worship were audible. I thank my Maker that, in the midst of judgment, he has remembered mercy. I humbly entreat my Redeemer to give me strength to lead henceforth a purer life than I have done hitherto. Then he stretched his hand out to be led. I took that dear hand, held it a moment to my lips, then let it pass round my shoulder. Being so much lower of stature than he, I served both for his prop and guide. We entered the wood and wended homeward. I'm just going to go ahead and read this chapter 38, the conclusion, since it is essentially an epilogue. Reader, I married him. A quiet wedding we had. He and I, the parson and the clerk, were alone present. When we got back from church, I went into the kitchen of the manor house where Mary was cooking the dinner and John cleaning the knives, and I said, Mary, I have been married to Mr. Rochester this morning. The housekeeper and her husband were both of that decent phlegmatic order of people to whom one may at any time safely communicate a remarkable piece of news without incurring the danger of having one's ears pierced by some shrill ejaculation, and subsequently stunned by a torrent of wordy wonderment. Mary did look up, and she did stare at me. The ladle with which she was basting a pair of chickens roasting at the fire did for some 3 minutes hang suspended in the air, and for the same space of time John's knives also had rest from the polishing process. But Mary, bending again over the roast, said only, Have you, miss? Well, for sure. A short time after she pursued, I seed you go out with the master, but I didn't know you were gone to church to be wed, and she basted away. John, when I turned to him, was grinning from ear to ear. I telled Mary how it would be, he said. I knew what Mr. Edward— John was an old servant and had known his master when he was the cadet of the house, therefore he often gave him his Christian name. I knew what Mr. Edward would do, and I was certain he would not wait long neither, and he's done right for aught I know. I wish you joy, miss. And he politely pulled his forelock. Thank you, John. Mr. Rochester told me to give you and Mary this. I put into his hand a £5 note. Without waiting to hear more, I left the kitchen. In passing the door of that sanctum some time after, I caught the words, She'll happen do better for him nor ony the other grand ladies. And again, if she ben't one of the handsomest, she's noan foul and very good-natured. She's fair beautiful. Anybody might see that. I wrote to Moor House and to Cambridge immediately to say what I had done, fully explaining also why I had thus acted. Diana and Mary approved the step unreservedly. Diana announced that she would give me time to get over the honeymoon, and then she would come and see me. She had better not wait till then, Jane, said Mr. Rochester when I read her letter to him. If she does, she will be too late, for our honeymoon will shine our life long. Its beams will only fade over your grave or mine. How St. John received the news, I don't know. He never answered the letter in which I communicated it. Yet 6 months after he wrote to me, without, however, mentioning Mr. Rochester's name or alluding to my marriage. His letter was then calm and, though very serious, kind. He has maintained a regular, though not frequent, correspondence ever since. He hopes I am happy, and trusts I am not of those who live without God in the world, and only mind earthly things. You have not quite forgotten little Adele, have you, reader? I had not. I soon asked and obtained leave of Mr. Rochester to go and see her at the school where he had placed her. Her frantic joy at beholding me again moved me much. She looked pale and thin. She said she was not happy. I found the rules of the establishment were too strict, its course of study too severe for a child of her age. I took her home with me. I meant to become her governess once more, but I soon found this impracticable. My time and cares were now required by another. My husband needed them all. So I sought out a school conducted on a more indulgent system, and near enough to permit of my visiting her often and bringing her home sometimes. I took care she should never want for anything that could contribute to her comfort. She soon settled in her new abode, and became very happy there, and made fair progress in her studies. As she grew up, a sound English education corrected in a great measure her French defects. And when she left school, I found in her a pleasing and obliging companion, docile, good-tempered, and well-principled. By her grateful attention to me and mine, she has long since well repaid any little kindness I ever had it in my power to offer her. My tale draws to its close. One word respecting my experience of married life, and one brief glance at the fortunes of those whose names have most frequently recurred in this narrative, and I have done. I have now been married 10 years. I know what it is to live entirely for and with what I love best on earth. I hold myself supremely blessed beyond what language can express, because I am my husband's life as fully as he is mine. No woman was ever nearer to her mate than I am, ever more absolutely bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh. I know no weariness of my Edward's society. He knows none of mine, any more than we each do of the pulsation of the heart that beats in our separate bosoms. Consequently, we are ever together. To be together for us is to be at once as free in solitude, as gay as in company. We talk, I believe, all day long. To talk to each other is but a more animated and an audible thinking. All my confidence is bestowed on him, all his confidence is devoted to me. We are precisely suited in character. Perfect concord is the result. Mr. Rochester continued blind the first 2 years of our union. Perhaps it was that circumstance that drew us so very near, that knit us so very close, for I was then his vision, as I am still his right hand. Literally, I was, what he often called me, the apple of his eye. He saw nature, he saw books through me, and never did I weary of gazing for his behalf and of putting into words the effect of field, tree, town, river, cloud, sunbeam, of the landscape before us, of the weather round us, and impressing by sound on his ear what light could no longer stamp on his eye. Never did I weary of reading to him, never did I weary of conducting him where he wished to go, of doing for him what he wished to be done. And there was a pleasure in my services, most full, most exquisite, even though sad, because he claimed these services without painful shame or damping humiliation. He loved me so truly that he knew no reluctance in profiting by my attendance. I felt I loved him so fondly that to yield that attendance was to indulge my sweetest wishes. One morning at the end of the 2 years, as I was writing a letter to his dictation, he came and bent over me and said, "Jane, have you a glittering ornament round your neck?" I had a gold watch chain. I answered yes. "And have you a pale blue dress on?" I had. He informed me then that for some time he had fancied the obscurity clouding one eye was becoming less dense, and that now he was sure of it. He and I went to London. He had the advice of an eminent oculist, and he eventually recovered the sight of that one eye. He cannot now see very distinctly, he cannot read or write much, but he can find his way without being led by the hand. The sky is no longer a blank to him, the earth no longer a void. When his firstborn was put into his arms, he could see that the boy had inherited his own eyes, as they once were, large, brilliant, and black. On that occasion he again, with a full heart, acknowledged that God had tempered judgment with mercy. My Edward and I, then, are happy, and the more so because those we most love are happy likewise. Diana and Mary Rivers are both married. Alternately, once every year they come to see us, and we go to see them. Diana's husband is a captain in the Navy, a gallant officer and a good man. Mary's is a clergyman, a college friend of her brother's, and, from his attainments and principles, worthy of the connection. Both Captain Fitzjames and Mr. Wharton love their wives, and are loved by them. As to St. John Rivers, he left England. He went to India. He entered on the path he had marked for himself. He pursues it still. A more resolute, indefatigable pioneer never wrought amidst rocks and dangers. Firm, faithful, and devoted, full of energy and zeal and truth, he labors for his race. He clears their painful way to improvement. He hews down like a giant the prejudices of creed and caste that encumber it. He may be stern, he may be exacting, he may be ambitious yet, but his is the sternness of the warrior Greatheart, who guards his pilgrim convoy from the onslaught of Apollyon. His is the exaction of the apostle, who speaks but for Christ, when he says, "Whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." His is the ambition of the high master spirit, which aims to fill a place in the first rank of those who are redeemed from the earth, who stand without fault before the throne of God, who share the last mighty victories of the Lamb, who are called and chosen and faithful. St. John is unmarried. He never will marry now. Himself has hitherto sufficed to the toil, and the toil draws near its close. His glorious sun hastens to its setting. The last letter I received from him drew from my eyes human tears, and yet filled my heart with divine joy. He anticipated his sure reward, his incorruptible crown. I know that a stranger's hand will write to me next to say that the good and faithful servant has been called at length into the joy of his Lord. And why weep for this? No fear of death shall darken St. John's last hour. His mind will be unclouded, his heart will be undaunted, his hope will be sure, his faith steadfast. His own words are a pledge of this. My master, he says, has forewarned me. Daily he announces more distinctly, surely I come quickly, and hourly I more eagerly respond, Amen. Even so come, Lord Jesus. The end. The end. Oh, interesting. The end of my book has reviews, contemporary reviews of what people thought of it at the time. That's fascinating. Radical Carrot, thank you for following. Enjoy your apprenticeship here. We done did it. St. John just died in India. He's dying in India. He's fine. What a great book. Yeah. Now we need to discuss. We need to discuss the whole book. Now that we've read the whole book. Well, first of all, what did you guys think? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Was it it was crazy good? Cool. I'm glad you guys, I really enjoy this book so much. It's such an odd book, isn't it? It's such an odd book. Happy end! We got it in the end. We got the happy end in the end. Also, there's a pumpkin. She climbed up while I was reading. It was a roller coaster for sure. 4 out of 5 stars. Yes, it is definitely a roller coaster of a book. Not what people expect when I say Victorian literature, which is one of the reasons that I love it so much. 7.8 out of 10. Too much water. I do like it when protags go through hell to earn their happy endings. Yes. And here, I think especially... Cheers, Zach. I think especially at the end of the book, you can see how the supernatural element that started in the very beginning of the book in the Red Room carries through the entire thing. And ultimately, leads to the resolution at the end, arguably. Although it's still left open to interpretation how much was supernatural and how much wasn't. Like how much were just visions or phantoms. But clearly Jane is superstitious and she thinks she considers the possibility that God might have taken her to Mr. Rochester, if we are to believe her account. 53 out of 66 books of the Bible. Yes. Don, you missed one chapter. In that chapter, Jane, after hearing his voice, Jane goes back to Thornfield Hall to find that it has completely burned down. She talks to a man who tells her that in the middle of the night, a fire had been started by Mr. Rochester's wife. Mr. Rochester went up to the roof where she was standing to get her down and get her out from the fire because he was taking everybody out of the building, and she jumped from the roof and died. And Mr. Rochester was caught in the falling beams as he tried to escape the house afterwards, and that's how he lost his hand and his sight. All right, good night, Nat Merrick. I'm glad you got to see the end. You could talk about this book for days. You read it first in high school, and it grows with your reading skill with each reread. I super agree, Reverend. I also read it first in high school, and each read I do, I'm like, there's new details, there's new thoughts, there's new, like, I'm just so incredibly amazed at how emotionally intelligent this book is. Like, most books are pretty emotionally intelligent. This book is incredibly emotionally intelligent about, like, how all the characters act, like, especially in its portrayal of St. John. I've like, in rereading it and, like, reading it aloud, I was like, wow, this is a really good depiction of this type of person, and how everybody around him still thinks he's a good person, because he likes God, so, and he doesn't do bad things. But, like, not even just St. John, but Jane herself, who is a totally peculiar protagonist for a woman at the time. Oh my god, Jane? No, nobody would ever accept Jane. Like, whoa, not what women were supposed to be back in the day. I'm gonna read through some of these contemporary reviews. If I see any good ones, I'm gonna read them aloud. These are lots of praise. Lots of praise. Lots of people very impressed for the author. It was, I believe it was anonymously published, or published under a male name, I think. St. John. St. John is the worst, isn't he? But for some reason we end the book with him. I've never been able to figure why we end the book with him, except that, like, ending the book with St. John is similar to ending the book with God. And ending the book with God lends more credence to the weight of the there's something supernatural happening throughout this book, theme that has happened, that was, like, there from the very beginning. Hang on, I'm gonna keep reading these. The reading of such a book as this is a healthful exercise. Oh, that's good. An extraordinary book of its kind, and as truly of a most noble purpose. There's also possibly that. Lots of things that happen in Jane Eyre are, like, not considered okay. And, like, to put this in context, Jane Eyre is a novel. Novels back in this time, I think they had become somewhat more acceptable by this time, but novels were still new. Novels, like, didn't start coming out until, like, 1800. And because most books before that were didactic, meaning they were, like, religious lectures and sermons and stuff like that. Yes, Dan. Well, Victorian Regency, I believe that the novel first started around the 1800. Phew! Bless me. Yeah, but so they were not, when novels first came out, because they were just works of fiction and they weren't used for teaching people things. People thought that, oh, FTC, that's so cute. I do want to hear what everybody's favorite parts were. But because novels weren't to teach anything, and they usually depicted people overwrought with emotion, because this was back when, like, Gothic literature was very big, and Gothic literature was very much about, like, sensuousness. It was about the senses. It was about passionate emotion. It's like what Jane and Mr. Rochester are doing, where, like, they're, like, screaming out their loves, and there's, like, ghosts everywhere, and like the god is speaking and nature is speaking to you, and like lots of beautiful descriptions of nature and lots of emotions everywhere. Frankenstein is also considered Gothic literature, as is Dracula, although Dracula is very different. Dirpa, thank you for the host, much appreciated. But yeah, so this was back, and so like novels were like that kind of thing. They were like overwrought with emotion, and they usually depicted like scandals. Lots of romance books came out at first, and like young women were reading these books, and some young men, but like men reading novels was considered like ew, gross. Like men are manly, so they're not supposed to read novels about feelings. So mostly women read novels at first, and novels were really, really looked down upon. And that's why like Jane Eyre has a quote. I have that a mug that says that he who does not enjoy a good novel must be intolerably stupid, and that's where that quote comes from. It's not about like people who don't read books are stupid. It's about people who consider novels as like sinful and amoral are stupid. Because Jane Austen obviously was a big proponent of the novels. She loved them and wrote them. But like so in this context, Jane Eyre comes out, and Jane herself is a character who is like very not what you were supposed to be at the time. The events that happen in this book are not what is supposed to happen at this time. There's lots of arguably blasphemous things said about God in this book as well. Coarse and immoral. Deplore Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre became an instant bestseller, but developed a reputation as a naughty book. Yes, exactly. Because Jane acts poorly. They question God in Lowood Academy. Remember with oh god, what's her name? With Jane's friend who died, whatever her name was. She literally questions the teaching of God and interprets it for herself and decides on her own meaning for it, which is not a thing that you were supposed to do at this time. And it's a meaning that's way more similar to how we view, or how Christians today view God, than it was back then. And like it was like that was considered a lot. And like Jane, basically her morals are kind of in flex throughout the book because of Mr. Rochester and temptation, and she writes herself as a very moral person, but of course you can question whether you believe everything that she's written about herself. So this book was like a huge scandal when it came out. It was a huge scandal, and like God, I wonder what they would have thought if they had known that a woman had written it. Oh my God, could you imagine how their brains, how many monocles must have popped out of their heads? I don't remember why I was going on and on about the significance of novels, but there I was. So yeah, that's what I was saying. Ending the book with Mr. St. John Rivers and ending the book with God might have been an anticipatory act by Charlotte Bronte to counter the reputation that both novels have, and also the stuff that she had written in the book, to be like, no guys, don't worry, we're all still Christians here, I still love God, I'm not saying anything like that, Mr. St. John Rivers is the best man in this book, you know? Popping monocles. Popping the monocles. Yeah. So I'm curious, what was everybody's favorite part of the book? I know. Complete nonsense, Dawn. Can you imagine a woman writing? I have. Ooh. Oh my god. Whoa. Oh, whoa. Sorry. Whoa, this is a nasty review. Whoa, this is a long review, but this is a nasty review. Hang on, let me see if I can find some quotes for you. Gold Nugget Contemporary Review. This was the North American Review in 1848. Wow, they're taking there's like 6 paragraphs of introduction before they even talk about which book they're talking about. Oh my god, I'm gonna read this out to you because this is how people wrote back in the day, and this is what was in people's newspapers. This is fascinating. Hang on, I'm gonna read this to you guys. The first 3 novels on our list are those which have proceeded from the firm of Bell& Co. Not many months ago, the New England states were visited by a distressing mental epidemic, passing under the name of the Jane Eyre fever, which defied all the usual nostrums of the established doctors of criticism. Its effects varied with different constitutions, in some producing a soft, ethical sentimentality which relaxed all the fibers of conscience, and in others exciting a general fever of moral and religious indignation. It was to no purpose that the public were solemnly assured, through the intelligent press, that the malady was not likely to have any permanent effect either on the intellectual or moral constitution. The book which caused the distemper would probably have been inoffensive had not some sly manufacturer of mischief hinted that it was a book which no respectable man should bring into his family circle. Of course, every family soon had a copy of it, and one edition after another found eager purchase. The hero, Mr. Rochester, became a great favorite in the boarding schools and in the worshipful society of governesses. That portion of young America known as ladies' men began to swagger and swear in the presence of the gentler sex, and to allude darkly to events in their lives which excused impudence and profanity. Oh my God, real people were trying to act like Mr. Rochester? That's hilarious! Well, fathers and mothers were much distressed at this strange conduct of their innocents, and with a pardonable despair were looking for the dissolution of all the bonds of society. The publishers of Jane Eyre announced Wuthering Heights by the same author. Ooh, not the same author. Oh, they published these books under the same name. When it came, it was purchased and read with blah blah blah. The novel of Jane Eyre, which caused this great excitement, purports to have been edited by Currer Bell. The said Currer divides the authorship, if we are not misinformed, with a brother and sister. The work bears the marks of more than one mind and one sex, and has more variety than either of the novels which claim to have been written by Acton Bell. Okay, blah, 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 blah. From the masculine tone of Jane Eyre, it might pass altogether as the composition of a man, were it not for some unconscious feminine peculiarities, which the strongest-minded woman that ever aspired after manhood cannot suppress. These peculiarities refer not only to elaborate descriptions of dress and the minutiae of the sick chamber — oh yeah, only women care about that stuff — but to various superficial refinements of feeling in regard to the external relations of the sex. It is true that the noblest and best representations of female character have been produced by men, but there are niceties of thought and emotion in a woman's mind which no man can delineate, but which often escape unawares from a female writer. There are numerous examples of these in Jane Eyre. Oh, so this is like somebody trying to be like, oh, I think a woman was involved. Blah blah. I want to get to more of the like blah blah blah. Now they're just describing the book. Blah 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 blah. Blah 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 blah. The popularity of Jane Eyre was doubtless due in part to the freshness, raciness, and vigor of mind it evinced, but it was obtained not so much by these qualities as by a frequent dealings in moral paradox and by the hardihood of its assaults upon the prejudices of proper people. Nothing causes more delight, at least to 1/3 of every community, than a successful attempt to wound the delicacy of their scrupulous neighbors, and a daring peep into regions which acknowledge the authority of no conventional rules. The authors of Jane Eyre have not accomplished this end without an occasional violation of probability and considerable confusion of plot and character, and they have made the capital mistake of supposing that an artistic representation of character and manners is a literal imitation of individual life. The consequence is that in dealing with vicious personages, they confound vulgarity with truth, and awaken too often a feeling of unmitigated disgust. The writer who colors too warmly the degrading scenes through which his immaculate hero passes is rightly held as an unequivocal teacher of purity. It is not by the bold expression of blasphemy and ribaldry that a great novelist conveys the most truthful idea of the misanthropic and the dissolute. The truth is that the whole firm of Bell & Co. seem to have a sense of the depravity of human nature peculiarly their own. It is the Yahoo, not the demon, that they select for representation. Their pandemonium is of mud rather than fire. So what? These people are basically mad that they're not writing bad people, right? Like, they're mad that, like, Jane Eyre wrote bad people and, like, didn't, like, fully outright condemn them. But also, can we go back to the part where, like, governesses were reading this book and, like, secretly hoping that they could marry, like, their masters, and that, like, men were going around trying to woo women by darkly referring to their super dark, secret, shady, dark past of, oh yeah, I'm a bad person now because I had a bad thing happen to me. Like, if Jane Eyre caused that in popular culture, I'm gonna throw up. Is it really surprising though? It is to me. I like it's surprising, but it's not surprising, but it is surprising because we don't think of people back then as acting like like Jane Eyre is basically what the equivalent of like Twilight or 50 Shades of Grey, where everybody started trying to like go around and I'm flummoxed. That is how trends work. It's just like crazy to think, because like I would have assumed that trends happen differently nowadays because we have the internet, and like and so like I was like, oh, things are getting this big because we have the internet. I did not think that like literally the same exact thing was happening, just way slower. Jane Eyre is pop culture. Yeah, because they marketed it really well and they were like, Jane Eyre is super scandalous, and everyone's like, oh, that's abhorrent. Oh no, how awful. Oh, please keep that away from me. Like, governess is reading those naughty books. Listen, governess has got to do something with her extra time. I do have a fan. It's a very naughty fan. You're not supposed to read it. Print and press. That's true. That's true. I wonder, hang on. I wonder if there's like, oh, the Christian Remembrancer. Again, more speculations about whether the writer was male or female. A lot of speculation about male or female. Jane Eyre professes to be an autobiography, and we think it likely that in some essential respects it is so. Wow. This person actually thinks that Jane Eyre is autobiographical. That's crazy. That's fair, Harvest. I went to like a Pompeii museum exhibit, and they had one special part of the exhibit that was just all of the graffiti that people were like scrawling on the walls of Pompeii, and they had like translated them all out for you to see, and it was so stupid. It was like JS was here, and it was like so and so is like a dirty fool, and then it's like, you're just mad because I'm dating her now, and it was just like this it's just like a freaking chat room. It's like a public chat. Any public chat in any video game is the same thing as the graffiti on those walls. It's dumb. I know that people are the same. It's hilarious to me that in the Victorian times, but I know this about the Victorian times. The Victorian times were secretly super hella naughty. Like, I know everybody thinks of Victorians as like prim and proper and very like, we're all moral and we don't like sex and all that. Victorians were real freaky. They were real freaky behind the scenes. They passed around sex instruction manuals. Actually, the female orgasm was very popular during Victorian times, and it was considered like a thing that you should do because it was considered good for her health and good for babies. And then after that, I think around the Regency era, there was like a need to be like way more pure, and at some point during that we just forgot that the female orgasm existed. But like I'm just saying. Oh, you have FTC? Yeah, it's really fascinating. The dicks in the road? No, I've never been. I want to be. 1, invent writing. 2, invent message cave. Crazy. Anyways, sorry, I got distracted with like random historical knowledge. Most of these reviews are just them being like, did a guy or a girl write this? And that's so stupid. Like, I get it. Like, these reviews are literally basically saying like, there are some touches that imply that a woman might have been involved, but there's no way a woman could have written this whole thing. It's too smart. And like, that's a lot to like literally see it written there. I wonder how much Charlotte Bronte must have laughed when she read those reviews. So, now to actually discuss the book. I'm trying to think of which part of the book was my actual favorite part of the book. I feel like it's probably still the Red Room. I really like the Red Room. A review where it was like you are stupid, or a graffiti that was like you are stupid. I wouldn't be surprised by either. You love when Jane first confesses her love in the garden to Mr. Rochester. Yeah, that scene is very, I love that scene a lot because it ends with the lightning striking the tree. And that like something that's like too romantic for me is a little like, for me it's not to my taste, but romance followed by lightning striking a tree, now that I can get behind. I like that gothic sentiment right there. Mhm. It is very romantic, though. The prose in this book is very romantic. I don't feel that I did justice to it, the way that they talk to each other and how romantically they talk to each other, because it's when I was reading it out loud, I felt a little bit ridiculous, just because it's so elevated and so passionate and so profuse. Like I would never, and like very well thought out in a way that people, when they're actually high in moments of passion, would not actually say the things. But that's not the point. This is not a book that's trying to be naturalistic. It's a book that's trying to achieve heightened expressions of emotions, and it achieves that. But yeah, I wonder. I just wonder. The whole relationship between Jane and Rochester was your favorite. So have you guys turned back over to Rochester? Do you like Mr. Rochester again? The visual spelunking Jane does on all the other ladies. It's not subtle. You wouldn't have? I could. I could. I could. I could, Dan. That's not a bad idea. I might pocket that for some other time. Um, One of the interpretations that I've read of this book, and one of the things that I like the most about it, is that in between, like, when Jane was first going to get married to Mr. Rochester, that situation had a lot of bad juju, because Mr. Rochester was so far elevated above her in station, in fortune, in age, in experience, in worldliness, in every possible way, that he kind of disregarded a lot of the things that she said that she had decided for herself. She was like, "No, I don't want that dress. I don't want that veil. I don't want these pearls. I don't like I want Adele to stay with us. I don't." She was saying all these things, and he was kind of ignoring what she wanted. And she fought back against that, and she kind of held her own, but it did seem rather weird that he wasn't like treating her like she was her. And so I think like by the end of the book she comes back to him, and like the parts of their relationship that I loved the most were like Jane is sassy and she's clapping back at him, and Mr. Rochester is like having fun with how spirited she is, are like the main highlights of their relationship, because Mr. Rochester has not only fallen somewhat, but Jane has also risen. She's now an independent woman. She does not need to feel dependent on him. It's arguable how dependent she felt on him, but she was literally his dependent, and she was not anymore his dependent by the time she came back, and had friends, had a place to go that wasn't there if something happened. She had money that she could use for whatever she wanted to. She was legally in charge of herself. um, Mr. Rochester needed to be humbled before him and Jane would work as equals in love. Exactly. He didn't dislike him at any point aside from the whole lying to Jane about his wife thing. And the dressing up like a gypsy thing was weird. Yeah. The dressing up like a Romani was not, but was strange. His whole like, I'm gonna spend a really long time trying to make Jane confess that she loves me was weird. But I guess maybe to Mr. Rochester's mind, he wanted to be sure that Jane loved him, and not that if he approached Jane, Jane was gonna be like, you're rich, sure. But yeah, that's the point that I was working towards, Riverin, was that by the end of the book they have become equals, and their dynamic is that of equals, and Jane has the ability and the responsibility at that point to make a lot of decisions for them as a couple, but also for herself. And finally, the man that she is with is not telling her no, her decisions are wrong. He's listening to her, and um yeah, he's listening to her and he's taking her concerns like seriously. And I don't know. I don't know. What do you guys feel in the end for this book? Do you feel like there was supernatural things happening? Do you think some of them are supernatural, some of them weren't? Or are you kind of like Chase? I'm not sure Chase is still here, but are you kind of like Chase where you feel that none of it is supernatural, all of it can be explained in some way, and some of it might in fact be explained by like mental illness or superstition or fatigue or stress or any of the other things that Jane's been dealing with the entire time that she was dealing with literally everything? Or she's lying, because that's always a possibility, is that Jane could be an unreliable narrator. She does come out of this book looking rather spotless. You believe. You're not sure if it matters that it was supernatural or not? It doesn't matter to the plot of the story, but it matters how you interpret the theme of the book. Because this book is one that the concept of fate and destiny and like God's plan and that kind of thing comes up a lot in it. And you see bad people getting comeuppance. You see Mrs. Reed got her comeuppance. You see John Reed, the boy who was evil to Jane at the beginning, he gets his comeuppance. You see the director of Lowood Academy get his comeuppance. St. John Rivers gets his comeuppance, arguably. Mrs. Rochester gets her comeuppance, and even Mr. Rochester gets his comeuppance. And Jane does as well. She starves for like 3 days in the woods and nearly dies before she is given a second chance at life at the hand of a pastor. So like of a clergyman. Literally at the hand of God, she is given a second chance at life. So you can make some arguments about fate, or you can make some arguments about coincidence. You can make some arguments about true love and the concepts of soulmates and all that thing, but all of these arguments depend on whether or not that supernatural aspect of the book was real or whether it was a cause of overwrought emotions. Suggesting witchcraft. There's this whole tone of magic and witchcraft that is used throughout, yeah. I believe too, Riverin. I love this book for its supernatural elements, and I think it makes the book so much more wonderful to consider the supernatural elements and to think about, like, perhaps there are these forces working in the background the whole time and how those forces show up in the book, which, like, the more you read it, the more you see little things that these forces could be doing. Or not, or, you know, or maybe no, you don't have to believe it. We have all got our comeuppance once, though. Yes, exactly. So it could just be a coincidence, or it could be the consequence of a bad person's actions. Like, Mr. Rochester's thing is arguable, but, like, it's not surprising that Mrs. Rochester would jump from the building. It's not surprising that John Reed would have gotten himself into so much trouble that he died. It's not surprising that Mrs. Reed would end up alone and unloved on her deathbed. So all these could have just been natural consequences of people's bad actions, which would explain why St. John doesn't get any. He doesn't have any real consequences for his actions, except, I guess, if you want to look at it that way, the punishment he himself chose for himself. If you want to think of it as a punishment by going to be a missionary and never marrying and, like, suffering all day. I don't know, he seemed like he wanted that, so I don't know that it's a punishment. You think Jane was hearing Mr. R's voice because she was thinking about her choices and remembered him? So you don't think that there was a supernatural connection in the air where Jane and Mr. Rochester connected to one another? The detail that I think is really interesting there is that Mr. Rochester heard the echo of her voice bouncing across the mountain. So she was like, "Where are you?" And he heard the like, "Where are you?" echo that she heard. And, like, that's like, all right, but how are you going to explain that? How are you going to explain that elsewhere? Then again, if you wanted to, you could look at it as Jane is an unreliable narrator and she, like, made this very fanciful story about why she went back to Mr. Rochester, but the truth is, like, maybe Rochester started the fire and murdered his wife, and then maybe he wrote a message to Jane and was like, "Hey, Jane, my wife's dead. Want to get married?" And Jane got the message, and she was like, "Sure, I'm gonna go." And, like, maybe you can make an argument that that's what happened, and Jane concocted this whole other story to make herself look better about it. Now, Jane throughout the book takes pains to try to be a reliable narrator or to appear as a reliable narrator, especially in the beginning of the book, because she always is excusing people who treat her poorly. Like, she makes a bunch of excuses for Mrs. Reed. She makes a bunch of excuses for the guy who owned Lowood Academy, and like tries to give their perspective of the situation. So you could argue, I don't know, does that help or hurt her credibility? That's up to you. I prefer to think of Jane Eyre as a book um, and push her off. Yes, right? And everybody else is there and they were like, I saw it. But you have to imagine, if a house is on fire and there's smoke billowing up to the sky, they heard Mr. Rochester call out to her and she fell. But like, that doesn't explain anything. Like, perhaps she saw him and like was scared and took a step back and then she fell. Maybe she purposefully jumped. Maybe he pushed her. Maybe, like, there's a lot of possible scenarios for what could have happened up there. Jane didn't see it. The guy who was telling the story was very fond of Mr. Rochester and might lie on his behalf. He used to know the guy when he was a kid. And maybe nobody could see on the ground what was happening up on the roof, surrounded by flames and smoke. Yeah, it is something that is very convenient. And you do have to wonder, Mr. Rochester hating her as much as he did, if he would go out of his way to be a moral person and go and try and rescue her and enter a flaming building and go up to the roof of a flaming building in order to rescue a person. Was rewarded with love by accepting God into his heart and still trying to save Bertha, even though his life is better with her dead. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely the narrative that Jane has written. That's definitely the narrative Jane writes. Is that Mr. Rochester is deep down a moral person and went and tried to save her. You could also but at which point, like, I don't know. At which point, though, I do, like, wonder in my head. I'm like, but he did try to come back down and immediately have his eyes, like, he went blind and lost a hand. And those seem more like punishments for something super bad that he literally just did than it does, Or it could have been like a transaction. Like, God's gonna have mercy on you and get rid of your wife, but for a price. If she set fire to your home, you wouldn't be super invested in getting her out safe after everything else he'd been through. And that's open for interpretation, yeah. I prefer to read the book as though Jane is a reliable narrator, but it is an interesting perspective to take to ask these kinds of questions, because you can very easily see how a lot of the things that she describes could look a lot worse. They could look a lot worse. Which isn't to say that she's lying, but I'm just saying that people who choose to read the book as though she is unreliable, there's merit to that. Oh, did you just come in for the end? Oh, well, you're in for a wild ride if you choose to read the book again. To read the beginning of the book or listen to the streams before. Mm-hmm. She can be justifying the fact that she married her boss, and she could be justifying the fact that, like, I mean, honest to God, maybe they were, like, still in contact, and she was like, yeah, but what if, like, hey, I am an independent woman now, what if your wife is gone? It's possible St. John Rivers did have news of Mr. Rochester when he came to tell her that they were family. You could just make these arguments because there's a lot of things that could have been extremely improper, and it's very convenient that nothing improper happened for the entire book. For the entire book, Jane is always in the moral right, and that is very convenient. Like, she knew nothing about the fact that he had a wife before. She never suspected his feelings for her. They never did anything improper before they were married. They never did anything improper before they got married for realsies. His wife just happened to die at a convenient moment. She just randomly chose to go back to him because she heard his voice on the wind. you know, there's just a lot of conveniences that like, I see how people make that argument. She was improper in other ways during the time. In what ways? I'm not actually sure that she's improper in that she is like, she breaks proprieties with her conversation all the time. Like, she's like, this is stupid, I'm just gonna say what I think. And women weren't supposed to do that. So she's improper in that way, but she's not like immorally improper, I don't think. Maybe. Here, take my watch, for he could not see it anyway. You keep my watch from now on. And then she wears it around her neck, which is hella cute. You know what? I'm fine with it. Even if they did plot to murder his wife, honestly. I mean, but then you get into questions of like, is Jane's description of the wife correct? And you're like, oh no. I can't believe that people read this book and thought it was a real autobiography. I can't believe that people read this book and thought it was real. He hit a woman in his house, and the lightning struck the tree, and the whole thing burned down. And like, there's so many weird things that happen in this book. Why did people think it was real? I'm sorry. I'm stressed. Oh god, we've been sitting here in silence. I'm sorry. I'll put some stream music on. Oh, Zelda music on, in fact. But... oh no, I don't mean to scare your dog. Weird things do happen in real life. And weird supernatural coincidences do happen in real life still. That's why people believe some of the things that they do. He's fine now. You're good, doggy. You're good. Hello, pupper. Yeah. If you guys don't have anything else to discuss about this book, I'll start winding down the stream. I do want to say that for the next book club, I think I might still take next Sunday off. It depends. If I end up feeling like I'm able to go, then I'll go. But I might end up taking a Sunday off just to see if I can recuperate. And I am thinking about... for book club, I am thinking about, let me get a link for you guys, trying to do it in a way that is more sustainable for me. So what I have here is a link to a Google Forum document to suggest books for book club. What I want, ideally, is for these books to be in the canon, because I can't read anything, like, not in the canon, but not under copyright, because I can't read anything that would be illegal for me to read. But B, relatively short. I picked Jane Eyre. I forgot how long Jane Eyre was. It's a really long book. And when books are really long, it makes me want to do really, really long reading streams so that we can, like, actually make some progress over the course of months, since we only do book club once a week. So I'm thinking shorter books, maybe like 200 pages, give or take. And that are not under copyright, in the public domain. And so here's the link to the form. If you have any suggestions, please drop them in there. I found a website called How Long to Read, and I can drop things in there and see how long it'll take to read. Obviously, reading it out loud, you have to like double it. I'll be able to compile together all of the hours spent reading Jane Eyre and have a better guess at how long it will take for me to read these things aloud. Yeah, but that's my thought, is that, like, possibly when we recommence book club might only last for maybe, like, 2 hours-ish a stream. Just so that I'm not overtaxing myself, and we'll be reading shorter books so that we can still get through books, even though I won't be reading for, like, 3 or 4 hours. The novel! That sounds fascinating. That sounds fascinating. I know that there is one Star Wars book that I would love to read, and it's the Star Wars book about, like, Han and Leia immediately post episode 6, and it sounds bizarre because Han kidnaps Leia. It's not canon anymore, but, like, Han kidnaps Leia and, like, tries to force her to marry him, and I'm like, what is happening? Sounds like a great time. in the way that only I in particular enjoy. I love stuff that's weird like that. Yeah, I know about those. They're like pulpy. They're pulpy books. Which is not like me saying a bad thing. Pulpy books can be super great. Pulp fiction. But yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed Jane Eyre. I hate you. Star Wars. Just written with like very intense descriptions of setting, clothes, manners, and emotions. That's Victorian style. And like lots of social protocol for people to follow. You thought that might not be the case, but there were lots of social protocols to follow back in the day. All right, hopefully that book works, and that link works, and you guys will be able to, I'll put it in the Discord as well. Exclamation point playlist. We'll show the playlist. I think. Yeah, there you go. Feel free to follow it. I still add new stuff to it every now and then. No problem, Harvest. So, what is everybody's one good thing that happened today and one good thing you're looking forward to tomorrow? My good thing is that I'm, fingers crossed, hopefully gonna finish the thing that my work that I need to finish today. And that we finished Jane Eyre. I am happy and kind of impressed that we did it, even though I don't know why I'm impressed, but I'm kind of impressed that we did it. Thou art part of my brotherhood, Anakin. Once I held profound feelings for your frame and yourself. But now I, hesitantly, ardently, must say I am concerned about the bent to which your actions have taken. I've read a lot of Victorian books. Your good thing is that you did some writing, even though you hate every word. Yay! That is a good thing. That is a good thing. You'll probably hate it less over time. I feel you, because I've been writing some words where I'm just like... I'm going back to edit them now. You witnessed the great reverse sweep in Overwatch League history. Shanghai over Seoul 4-3. Oh! I didn't know that happened, but that does sound very exciting. You finished a video for your students today. This is not hanging over your head as something you need to do. DJ Emiliano. Oh my god, you're speaking to my soul right now. Congratulations on doing that. I hate things hanging over my head. Congratulations on being free. Good luck, Dan. Stay safe. It feels so good. I bet it does. To be able to like relax and like lay down and be like, I don't need to do that. Ugh. I aspire to be feeling that tonight as well. I aspire. You can check off another book off your Goodreads list. Yay! I'm glad to have helped you in this journey. Dawn, thanks for coming with me and reading this book with me. I'm very happy that you guys did and have enjoyed it so much. Ah. 3 more. You sound like the rest of my friends who are also teachers, which is just like, I'm always doing stuff. Ha! It never ends. It was fun. Good. Good. Even though you guys couldn't get a P-hype train. Yeah, very true story. My stepmom and some of my friends are teachers, and whew. I will tell a funny anecdote. I was talking to my stepmom yesterday, and she said she was like driving down the road and she saw a billboard that somebody had hired, and they put on the billboard, "Teachers, we know you always asked for more pay and wanted us to respect you. We get it now. We are so sorry. We will give you cash to take our children and respect you as much as we can, please." And I was like, yeah. I was like, wouldn't it be nice if something good came out of this, if people were like, wow, we really need to like respect and pay our teachers. Oh, wow. Wow, yeah. What a particular time to get into education. You're going to have a very interesting perspective to bring to education once things calm back down. That's probably very good because you're just going to have a lot of different views on things. Very valuable. Very valuable. Oh, that's awesome. One of my best friends lives in Chicago. I've never been though. Jellin. All right. Let me see if there's any chill streams to raid. If there's not, then we probably just won't raid anyone. Oh. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we can do that. Business management? Yeah. Yeah. All right. All right, well done. So, currently, Mini Lily, who many of you know from the chat and from Discord, is streaming a Pokemon Y Blind Nuzlocke. Yeah, I bet. Oh, that's gonna be great to have just dealing with parents. But she's currently streaming a Blind Nuzlocke. If you haven't been to one of Lily's streams, they're very chill because Lily, at least as far as I remember, I don't remember any time that Lily has ever spoken verbally. Lily usually just chats in the chat, and then you have just like the Pokemon background music. And if you follow along with the Nuzlocke, you can get really invested, but if you just need good background noise, they're there too, and it's all very entertaining, and Lily knows so much about everything Pokemon and everything Nuzlocke. There's so many more Nuzlockes than I thought there ever were. So yeah, we're gonna raid Lily because that seems like a good time and a chill time, or a very interesting time depending on how interested you are in Pokemon, in Nuzlocks. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming to the end of Jane Eyre. We did it. And I will see, yes, Mini Lily, and I will see another stream in the future. Again, if you have any book suggestions, please let me know. I'll put that link in the Discord so you guys can add your suggestions if you have any. And I will see you guys on the game streamings on Tuesday. I don't know what I'm gonna play, but I'll figure it out. Will do. You guys take care too. What? I almost spilled water all over my keyboard. Okay. Bye everybody. Let's raid Lily in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.